remain standing just for a moment.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Yes, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Turner, could you give your full name, please?
It's Paul Jeffrey Turner.
Thank you. Could we have on screen, please, LCC 201802? Thank you. Do you recognise that as your statement, Mr. Turner?
I do, yes.
Thank you. We see in the top right it's dated the 12th of September 2025. Is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Could we have page 23, please? Thank you. You've helpfully prepared an annex to your statement, which is a chronology. Can you confirm that that is true to the best of your knowledge and belief too?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, I want to ask you first, please, about your background. You tell us that you've worked in education since 2001, including as a teacher and in various management roles in education. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You've worked in local government since 2015, including as a school safeguarding advisor. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you've worked for Lancashire County Council since the 1st of February 2024.
That's correct, yes, thank you.
Your role is as Director of Education, Culture and Skills. Can you just shortly tell us what that entails?
So I have overall strategic responsibility below the Director of Children's Services, the statutory director, for everything related to education, special educational needs, early years, cultural services, child and family wellbeing, libraries, a whole portfolio, a large portfolio of areas, but the vast majority of the work is in education and special educational needs on a daily basis.
Clearly, you were in role from February 2024, so for most of the period that we're looking at, you weren't in role. Although there was an overlap of a few months, is this right? You had no direct involvement in AR's case?
That's correct, yes.
I want to ask you, please, about the corporate structures at Lancashire County Council in relation to your role. Is this right? I think you tell us at your paragraph 7 that the structure of the education department includes teams for pupil access, admissions, attendance, SEND, and children missing from education.
That's correct.
Thank you. And it might help to have up on screen page 3, paragraph 8, where you set out the roles of that department. But they include monitoring and advising in respect of permanent exclusions, brokering online education or face-to-face tutoring for children who are unable to attend schools, supporting schools with attendance matters, and monitoring children who are missing from education, we see on that list.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. There's also the inclusion team. What's the difference between the education department and the inclusion team?
So it's one directorate. Education is probably what you'd loosely term to be school improvement, school standards, attendance, and so on and so forth. Inclusion is children missing from education and largely special educational needs and disabilities.
And I think we saw supporting children who are missing from education as part of the education team as well. Is there a crossover?
There is a crossover. The nature of the cohorts are such that we need to have a crossover between teams to effectively monitor the welfare and education of those children.
Thank you. And if we just have up, please, page 4, paragraph 9. Thank you. We have the roles and responsibilities of the inclusion department there, and we see the list, but it includes processing EHCP, education, health and care plan assessments, arranging educational psychology assessments, providing specialist teacher support for SEND and preventing exclusion, procuring and commissioning alternative education provisions, and commissioning and arranging specialist placements for children and young people with EHCP, and we'll come on to what SEND and EHCP are shortly. How are these separate teams expected to work together?
So they work together in respect of we all work for the benefit of children and families. So under my direction, we come together for meetings across the wider education directorate and wider social care directorates as well. So although they're classified as different structures, in essence, they're parts of a big team, and we have regular conversations and we'll do cross team working quite regularly. So if you're working with a child or a child and their family, those conversations about which school they went to, what their special educational needs were, whether they're in school at that present time, are regular conversations. So I think the separation of them on paper disguises the actual working of the team. We work together very closely. It is a very large county council, though with a very large geographical area, so the nature of some of these teams are dispersed across the county council, and the nature of the working is that we do work together on Teams as well, or other, online video platforms. So, yeah, I think the separation on paper covers up the nature of the actual reality of the work.
So if you were an individual working in the department, you would be working for one of these teams, is that right?
So you'd be working for one of these teams. However, that work would then encompass work across those teams. So, for example, if you were working in the elective home education team, you would also be speaking to the special educational needs and disabilities team to try and capture as good a picture of that child and their circumstances as you possibly could.
And have you reflected at all on that structure when you came in? There would seem to be potential risk for fragmentation and losses of information sharing when you have so many different teams.
Yeah, extensively. So as you pointed out, I started in February 24, and one of my mandates was to look at the structures. You'd expect that from a new leader to review and revise structures. So there is a potential for I'd say ineffective cross-team working because of the nature of the sheer number of children and the expectations around the legislation and statutory guidance. So my feeling is, and I've said this or alluded to it in my statement, that we have too much work and not enough people in Lancashire, and the complexity of the work has increased exponentially since 2020. So therefore, we have sought to, and we have done, put in place some additional staffing into those teams, and we are building it further because the nature of that expectation is that the numbers of children which those teams have to work with has grown beyond measure in recent years.
Thank you, and I will pick up on training and staffing shortly. Can I ask from the kind of other side of things? So, for example, a member of school staff who's trying to make contact with someone in LCC. Mm-hmm. How are they to navigate the different teams and ensure that they speak to the right person?
Mm-hmm. So we have a structure where if they make contact, for example, with myself, I would signpost them to the correct team, and I'm accessible to school leaders. We have a number of different heads of services and team managers who are also freely available on email and do see members of school staff regularly. So each member of school staff will have somebody who they know within the local authority, we hope, to be able to make contact with. They can phone the general phone numbers for Lancashire County Council as well and make contact and be directed via a switchboard to the most appropriate team that they determine. The primary methods of communication are via email. So it does become convoluted using email. It's one of those systems which you can be overwhelmed by the sheer number of emails. So I think it's fair to say that most schools in Lancashire, and I won't say all because there's always an inevitability that one or two schools will say they don't know how best to contact, know how to contact the education department, and we have regular bulletins go to schools with information on education and special educational needs. So the communication is quite free-flowing between schools, and we do have members of staff who go out to particular areas regularly to see head teachers and head teacher groups in Lancashire.
Just picking up on one thing that you mentioned and the emails, as part of your preparation and particularly preparing the chronology, you must have had to, or had the assistants in, unpicking a large amount of emails and trying to build a chronology. Would you agree that probably was not the easiest exercise to undertake?
Very difficult exercise. But one of the things which we're seeking to do at the moment, which we've implemented but will roll out over the next year in totality, is an education, health and care plan portal. So essentially it's an add-on to our systems to allow more effective communication between parents and workers. Because I acknowledge, and I think we generally acknowledge, that the email system does not work in the way which it should do, primarily because of the sheer volume of emails which come in on a daily basis.
Thank you, and we might come to some examples of that. I just want to ask you about types of schooling that are available to the council. Clearly, obviously, we have mainstream schools, whether they're academies or local authority maintained. Could you just explain what a pupil referral unit is, please?
So it's a short stay school, but in practice may require longer stays for children who've been permanently excluded from schools or who sometimes require short-term respite placements or intervention placements, or in the case of Lancashire and other local authorities, may constitute a medical placement for children who are too unwell to attend their school at that point in time. So they do have a governing body in the same way that a school would have. They used to have a management, well, it's called a management committee. So they function as a maintained school in exactly the same way as a mainstream secondary or primary school would, but they're predominantly for children who, at that moment in time, there is not a mainstream place available for them, and occasionally not a special school place available for them either.
So if they will receive pupils who've been excluded, presumably you'd expect them to be experienced in dealing with pupils who have a history of violence or use of weapons or knives.
Yeah, very experienced.
But less so for pupils with, for example, special educational needs like autism?
I would say, and this is a generalisation because it will be different across the different schools, they will have significant experience in special educational needs and will have a special educational needs coordinator and staff who've worked in mainstream primary and secondary schools who will be well aware of special educational needs. What I don't know in terms of specific special schools is what the level of specialism is within each school, but they definitely have experience of SEND.
Thank you. But of course, not the same level of experience as a specialist school.
No.
We'll come on to talk about Pressfield School as an example, which specialise in treatment of pupils with autism. Is that right?
Well, the education of children with autism. I think there's the treatment. So the education of children with autism.
Thank you. And specialist schools will specialise in dealing with a particular type of special educational need. Is that right?
Yeah, or a range of special educational needs.
Thank you. Outside of those three options, there is also mention of provision for social, educational and mental health, SEMH. Can you just explain what that is?
So that's a wide description of needs. So children may have a number of different reasons why they find it difficult to engage with their education or perhaps deal with other children, specific environments. So it's a large catch-all determination actually of their need. A number of different needs would fall into that. And the children will have varying degrees of complexity within SEMH as well.
And is the council able to provide one-on-one teaching and tutoring as well?
Yes, on occasion.
I want to move on to the statutory framework and governance. Is it fair to say this is an area where there's a considerable amount of statutory guidance and legislation?
Absolutely.
And I just want to try and break that down as simply as possible so far as relevant. Firstly, jurisdiction. Could we have up your statement, please, at page 6, paragraph 18? So we see there from the third sentence, the duty for Lancashire County Council is to provide for a Lancashire child. That's not a child that resides in the LCC area. This applies even if they go to school in another local authority. Residence is the criteria for placement. Pupil referral units, and you give the age there. And you say the school where the child is educated should make a referral to the local authority area where the child lives. Is that in relation to exclusion, which we'll come on to?
Yes. So if a child lives in Lancashire, we would reasonably expect them to go to a Lancashire pupil referral unit. And most of the referrals to pupil referral units in Lancashire come from Lancashire schools. But if a child is going to school in another area and they're permanently excluded, we would pick up their education in a Lancashire pupil referral unit.
Thank you. And in terms of jurisdiction, this also applies to an EHCP. It's the area where a child is resident that is responsible for an EHCP. Is that right?
That's correct.
And we've seen maps of this very early on in the hearings, but AR resided in Banks, so inside LCC, Acorns, the Range School and Pressfield School were both inside Sefton Metropolitan Borough Council's jurisdiction, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Acorns was also inside Lancashire County Council.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. So during the period that AR was at those schools, LCC retained responsibility for ensuring that AR attended school while he was of compulsory school age, is that right?
So this is where it's complicated in that we have a duty around all Lancashire children to safeguard them and their welfare, and that would reasonably extend, wouldn't it, if we knew about them attending another school or not attending another school, to be able to intervene in that process. However, the reality of it is, if a child is attending a school in Sefton, that Sefton local authority would usually pick up the attendance duties for that child in that area, whereas if a Sefton child was residing in Lancashire, we would pick them up for the child at a Lancashire school, going to a Lancashire school. That helps because we would see the registers, or would hope to be able to see the registers of all Lancashire schools and therefore all Lancashire children, and Sefton would be able to see all the registers for Sefton schools and Sefton children, which might also incorporate Lancashire children, if that makes sense. But West Lancashire borders a number of different local authorities, so for us to be able to intervene and even monitor the attendance of children attending schools outside of Lancashire adds another level of complexity to the monitoring of the education.
So I understand what you're saying about it being picked up because Sefton have access to the registers.
Yes.
But it's right, isn't it, that the responsibility for providing the education sits with Lancashire?
So the responsibility for ensuring that a child attends an education I would say falls across both local authority areas, because if we know about a child who's resident in Lancashire who's not attending a school, we have a duty around a child missing education. If a child is attending a school but not attending regularly, then the attendance duties around the standard attendance regulations would fall on Sefton Council via the school. So the school would, for example, instruct the local authority to issue penalty notices for periods of holiday and periods of non-attendance for a child that was attending in Sefton, and we would do the same for Lancashire no matter where they were resident. So this is where it becomes quite a complicated interface across the local authority boundaries.
So you're talking about practice, which comes down to who has access to the data, principally.
Absolutely.
Doesn't it? But the duty, as you say in your statement, is for Lancashire County Council to provide for a Lancashire child, is it not?
So if a child is not attending an education, we will pick up the responsibility, at least part of, but the duty is for us, if we identify a child who's resident in Lancashire, who's not receiving an education, the duty falls upon us.
Thank you. And for the educational health and care plan, again, Lancashire retains the duty, does it not?
We always retain the duty with an education, health and care plan around ensuring the provision which is in the education, health and care plan is delivered, and that's an absolute duty in law to do so.
Thank you. And that continues after a child turns 16, correct?
It does.
Because an EHCP can continue to the age of 25?
It can do, yeah. So the absolute duty to ensure the provision in the education, health and care plan is carried out is ours until that education, health and care plan ceases.
Thank you. I just want to talk about or look at the provisions for transfer. I think that the easiest way to do this might be to look at Miss Kate Dixon, who's the witness from the DFE statement, which is at DFE 30256. Thank you. And page 95, paragraph 376. So when a pupil moves schools, she says there's a statutory duty placed on local authority maintained schools to transfer data, and she gives the regulations which apply here. And she talks about the transfer in the common transfer file. Could you just explain what that is, please?
So it's usually a download from their management information system, which is then sent across to the new school's management information system, which contains all the key details of that child's education up to that point.
Thank you. And that data is to be transferred within 15 school days, we see there.
Yes.
Thank you. Could we just scroll down 2 pages to page 97 and paragraph 380, and just expand that, please. So the child protection file we see there is to be transferred by the designated safeguarding lead separately from the main pupil file. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Are you able to explain why that is?
So, and this has changed over a number of years, because it used to be as soon as possible, then it was 5 days. So the nature of this is that the common transfer file does not contain will not contain all the information available about that young person, especially pastorally and in relation to their contact with social care and safeguarding concerns and, you know, incidents of bullying and so on and so forth. Now, I say that as a sort of general statement because each school will record different things on their MIS system, and sometimes my experience of working in schools is that some of those records will only be accessible to some practitioners and not others, so therefore they're locked down for security reasons. The nature of it is that a school will hold, as you'd expect, significant safeguarding information where they've interacted with multi-agency processes around safeguarding. And this has been put in the legislation from my memory to guarantee that that information follows the child to that school. And some of the expectation, I mean, it used to be when I was working with schools on safeguarding that they would hand deliver the file, which was sometimes quite significant in size. These days, most schools will use some form of electronic record system like My Concern or CPOMS or Safeguard, and it then forms another common transfer file which can be uploaded to the new system and is done in a way which holds all the information in a time-stamped, unalterable way, so that if that safeguarding team ever has to go to court around something or present evidence in this case, it's sort of you can't change it, it's there. So it's really important that follows the child to the new setting, because the integration, the education, the pastoral support, special educational needs and so on and so forth hang upon a body of evidence which may not be contained in one source at one point in time.
And sorry, easy to slip into technical terminology, but MIS system?
Sorry, Management of Information System. So it's a system which holds
system.
The names of the children, their attendance and so on.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Moving on, please, to the provisions around attendance. Parents are under a duty to secure education of children of compulsory school age, correct?
Correct.
And the general principle is that students are to be educated according to parents' wishes.
That's true, yeah.
Local authorities have a statutory duty to arrange suitable full-time education for children of compulsory school age who otherwise might not receive it. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. Could we have up, please, the School Attendance Guidance 2019? It's DFE 4096. Thank you. And page 4. And the top there, this, I think, is guidance that was in place in, well, we said in 2019.
Yeah.
And you'll see there the government expects schools and local authorities to promote good attendance and reduce absence, including persistent absence, ensure every pupil has access to full-time education to which they're entitled, and act early to address patterns of absence. Could we see, please, page 8? And we see at the top there, all schools must agree with the relevant local authority the regular interval that the school will inform the local authority of any pupil who fails to attend school regularly or has been absent without the school's permission for a continuous period of 10 days or more. So is that the mechanism by which the council becomes aware of an absence, at least back in 2019?
So it would definitely have been the only way in 2019 that we would know by a school directly informing us about the level of absence.
Thank you. Could we have, please, page 17? And the top paragraph, can a school place a pupil on a part-time timetable? As a rule, no. All pupils of compulsory school age are entitled to a full-time education. In very exceptional circumstances, there may be a need for a temporary part-time timetable to meet a pupil's individual needs. I assume you're familiar with that.
I am, yes, thank you.
Thank you. And is this right, that this guidance in 2022 was supplemented by some rather more detailed guidance working together to improve school attendance?
It was, yes.
Penultimate topic on guidance, Mr. Turner, COVID-19. There was guidance issued by DFE on vulnerable children in COVID, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. So for your note, DFE 4048. And is this right, a child who was on an EHC plan was deemed vulnerable?
Yes.
And schools were expected to complete a risk assessment for children with an EHC plan to consider whether they could attend?
Correct, yeah.
Local authorities were to continue monitoring that vulnerable child's attendance during COVID.
That's correct.
And alternative provisions, so does that include a pupil referral unit?
It does, yes.
They were to keep open where it was feasible to do so, is that right?
Yeah, in practical terms, it depended upon levels of staff absence as well due to COVID, but in practical terms, the expectation was to remain open.
Thank you. Last topic of the guidance, EHCP. Could you just explain, please, briefly what an EHCP is?
So it's an education, health and care plan, which is essentially a legal document that guarantees provision for children and young adults up to the age of 25, so it runs from 0 to 25. It's set out in the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice 2015, which comes from the Children and Families Act 2014. And an education, health and care plan contains information about the child or young person themselves, what their special educational needs are, their health needs and social care needs, and then the provision which they require educationally and in terms of social care and health as well. There may be information in there about the work which they do around the chronically sick and disabled legislation, so for children with far greater complexity around a disability, and then naming a school, information about a personal budget, and information about the advice which was submitted to the local authority to compile the education, health and care plan. So it's a complex document which can be very long and takes a long time to produce.
And as you say, has a kind of legal weight, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We can see a sort of brief description in this in Ms. Dixon's statement. Could we have up, please, DFE 30256? And page 27. Thank you. We see the role of local authorities, and this is within the context of EHCPs. And she sets out provisions of the SEND Code of Practice and Part 3 of the Children and Families Act 2014. And the obligations on local authorities are to identify children and young people who may have SEND and carry out EHC needs assessments, create and maintain EHC plans, and in particular, if we look at the last sentence, must secure the provision it specifies. So the local authority is obliged to carry out anything in the EHCP, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. The expectation is that we secure the provision in the education, health and care plan.
Thank you. And I think the underlying statute for that provision is Section 42 of the Children and Families Act. Is that right?
It is.
Thank you. There's also an obligation for funding and provision, monitoring and accountability, and if we look over the page, engagement and production. If we could just expand paragraph 91, please. So perhaps we've covered the content of this, but it says that the local authority must prepare and maintain a plan where it's needed. Yeah,
Correct.
and legally enforceable enticement we see there. I just want to go to the SEND Code of Practice just to look at one or two other points of detail, please, which is at DFE 4042. And page 112, please. Looking at the two bullet points of paragraph 7.3, do we see there a duty to cooperate with the local authority for post-16 institutions for children and young people with SEN?
Yes.
And second bullet point, the duty to admit a young person if the institution is named on an EHC plan. So is this right? Schools are obliged to admit a child if they're named on the EHC plan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Could we have, please, page 172? Thank you. And if we look at the top two paragraphs, a child parent has the right to request a particular school to be named in the EHC plan. And we see the next paragraph, the local authority must comply with that preference and name the school or college in the EHC plan unless it will be unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude, or SEN of the child or young person, or attendance of the child or young person there would be incompatible with the efficient education of others or the efficient rule of use of resources. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yes.
Thank you. Could we have, please, page 186? And paragraph 9.131. So I think, again, we see there the obligation to secure special education provision specified in the plan. And if we could have, please, page 202. And paragraph 9.199. A local authority may cease to maintain an EHC plan only if it determines that it's no longer necessary for the plan to be maintained or if it's no longer responsible for the child and young person, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. So I'm afraid a lengthy trawl through the provisions, but we'll obviously come on to some matters which are relevant to those. Can I ask you in practice what the trigger is in typical situation to open an EHCP?
So there's a request for assessment by somebody. So they say in their opinion that the criteria for an EHCP assessment has been met. So they ask us to assess whether that's true or not. So somebody submits a request for assessment to us, and then we gather information to determine whether an education, health and care plan is necessary. If it is, then we compile information from numerous different parties to put that education, health and care plan together.
And there's a stepwise process to producing that document, which involves various consultations and presumably always must take a little bit of time to compile. Is that right? Yeah,
so it's set out in legislation how long the process should take. So it's 140 days or 20 weeks. And it is very regimented in terms of what the SEND Code of Practice says, and we have to follow SEND Code of Practice to put together a legally compliant education, health and care plan.
Thank you. I want to move on to the internal practices at LCC. Is this right? Staff presumably are trained to the statutory guidance that we have looked at.
Yes.
Is it a challenge training them to considerable amounts of guidance, which of course there's much more that we haven't looked at?
Definitely. A SEND Code of Practice is close to 300 pages. So yeah, no, it is. So we have now in Lancashire a training academy, SEND Academy, to run staff through those processes.
Thank you. You say in your statement, I think, that staff are not trained, it's your paragraph 11, on improving attendance and reducing suspensions and exclusions. So is that referring to social workers and other CSS staff rather than the education and inclusion department?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question, sorry.
So you talk about staff not being trained on improving attendance and reducing suspensions.
So they'll have a general awareness of it, I would assume, for most staff, because a lot of our staff come from working in schools as well. I think when we talk about social workers' knowledge, it is widening. We talk about it regularly in things such as child protection conferences and reviews. So in terms of specific training, they'll have an input from me, perhaps in a collaboration leadership team meeting, or have some bulletins about it from the Safeguarding Assurance Partnership, but no specific training in it.
Thank you. And you also say that there's no specific training for staff on violence or weapons, extremism or radicalisation or risk assessments. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
So we do have a mandatory training for the council on radicalisation and the prevent duty, and we have courses which members of staff can opt into, but there's no mandatory provision in relation to that. Most of our staff who prepare education, health and care plans do not work directly with children, if that makes sense. They compile information from professionals into an education, health and care plan. Those staff who work directly with children have significantly more training in how to navigate the complexities of the legislation and the expectations.
Nevertheless, we'll obviously come on to detail in AR's case about exclusions, information sharing, appropriate schooling and prevent. It's right, isn't it, that the features that we were just talking about, violence, weapons, radicalisation, all feature heavily in his case. Do you agree that is something that would be of benefit?
Absolutely.
To staff preparing EHCPs?
Absolutely.
And is that something that you are looking to introduce?
Yeah, so we're looking to, well, we have begun an extensive training programme for SEND staff. We do have an extensive training programme for school staff in general, and the expectation is that they would be skilled in a number of these areas. I think some of the things you're describing are very complex and nuanced and require detailed training. So you could attend a safeguarding board training through the local safeguarding board arrangements on some of those elements you've described. Certainly when I was a safeguarding advisor in another local authority, I used to train school staff on some of those elements, but not all.
You've already mentioned, but you also say in your statement that staffing levels were and are still low for the number of children in Lancashire.
Yes.
We'll come on to specific examples, but just in short, are you able to say what impacts that happened on the management of AR?
So there's a number of things about the staffing which impacted upon the management of the education, health and care plan, and that was staff transience and, so staff turnover, staff illness, obviously the COVID pandemic and the difficulties of working in that period and out of that period also impacted. The biggest thing I see daily in SEND work is a significant volume of work and a significant under-resourcing of people within the system to be able to deal with that demand for assessment, if I call it that.
And in your statement, you also talk about the SEND Improvement Board, which I think you say is attended by the Department of Education and NHS England, which was established after LCC and its partner agencies were judged to require intervention. Can you just briefly say why there was an intervention required?
Each local authority area has what's called an area SEND inspection. So it's a joint inspection between Ofsted and CQC, Care Quality Commission, which is NHS England. We'll have an advisor from NHS England there as well. So Lancashire County Council has had 3 consecutive judgments as a range of partners around SEND, which has required significant improvement. So the latest inspection, which was December 24, highlighted issues around strategic leadership across the partnership, so bringing people together to make improvements, quality and timeliness of education, health and care plans, communication, the neurodevelopmental pathway, which is in relation to autism, and then said communication and preparation for adulthood. Sorry for repeating myself. So the expectation there is that we comply with an improvement notice at Lancashire County Council to improve special educational needs and disabilities provision within what is an 18-month period. So the regulator is Ofsted. Department for Education issue the improvement notice. We work to discharge the improvement notice, and then Ofsted will re-inspect us against the same area SEND framework within 18 months to 3 years. Usually get a monitoring inspection within 18 months and then a full inspection within 3 years. The primary issue for us was a significant lack of timeliness in preparing education, health and care plans.
Thank you. So when you came in role,
yes,
there had already been a requires improvement decision made, and presumably it's been your role to try and sort of fix the issues that have arisen. Is that
mine with other people, obviously. So it serves nobody to have a system which doesn't work well enough, and practically it's a very expensive, resource-heavy system where the expectation placed upon local authorities has risen exponentially just in terms of numbers. So Lancashire has just currently between 16 and 17,000 education, health and care plans, and close to 300,000 children within the system. And the nature of it was that number of education, health care plans has almost doubled in the last 5 years. So actually, in terms of keeping up with the level of need in the system, that's been an exponential growth in need. And I'll be honest, when I arrived in Lancashire, the staffing hadn't kept up with the level of need.
I want to move on now to the timeline, starting with the exclusion from the range and initial period at Acorns for AR. Did, to your knowledge, LCC have any involvement in the decision to permanently exclude AR from the range?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you. Do you have experience of dealing with exclusions in your role?
Yes.
And in your experience, is it usual or unusual to exclude a pupil for possession of a knife at school?
Not unusual.
Thank you.
No.
The selection of the Acorns. After the exclusion, LCC had a statutory obligation to provide alternative education within 6 days. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so the Acorns had to be selected within that time frame, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
I think the letter that we see says that AR is going to the Acorns because he's a West Lancashire resident. So
yeah.
The citation for that is LCC 201376.
Thank you.
Would the choice have been as simple as that hit the accessibility?
Yes.
Thank you. You've already used the phrase short stay school, but it's right, isn't it, that Acorns is a short stay school?
It is, yeah.
And you say in your statement at paragraph 17 that the intention is for pupils, when they go to a pupil referral unit, to reintegrate into a mainstream school, although you say in your experience that's actually uncommon for the majority of pupils and stays are often long.
Absolutely.
Why is that? Because it's difficult for a student who has been excluded to find provision at a mainstream school?
Absolutely. So the admission system is difficult to navigate, and the nature of the differences in admission systems, where you have academies who control their own admissions, local authority schools who we're the admissions authority for them. So we do have something called an in-year fair access protocol, which allows children and their families who may find it hard to secure a school place in either the normal admissions round or what we'd call an in-year admission to secure a place through a different methodology. But it is incredibly difficult, in my experience, to find a school which will accommodate the needs of a child who's been excluded for significant violence or carrying a weapon. without some significant conversation around how that would be handled in school. And a head teacher's duty is for the health and safety of all children and staff in that school. So it carries a huge level of responsibility and decision making upon whether that educating that child, for example, will prejudice the education of all the other children in that school. And it may well be that the behaviour of that child is so significant that the head teacher will say it would do. So we do encounter this all the time. So we do have very robust discussions with head teachers about their concerns. And it wouldn't be right to say that no child who's been permanently excluded for carrying a knife is ever not admitted into a mainstream school, because that is not the case. Some children do. But it adds an extra level of complexity. When you add the level of complex special educational needs as well into the picture for some children, it adds an extra level of complexity too, which makes it very difficult to navigate. The thing about West Lancashire as well is, when you talked about pupil referral, we have 9 pupil referral units in Lancashire for the whole county. And West Lancashire is bordered by a number of different local authorities, and we have to consider travel distance as well, proximity to home, but equally whether there's available places. So sometimes there are no places available in our pupil referral units.
Can I ask you about transfer of information between schools? We've looked at the policy for this already. We will hear evidence that the Acorns were aware of the reasons for the exclusion, but that not all information about risk was passed, at least initially, to them. Yeah. And also of much more fundamental issues with the transfer of risk information from the Acorn school to Pressfield School. I think we saw from the policy that the responsibility for passing on that information is on schools, correct?
Yes, correct.
Does that remain the case where a child has been excluded and then is reassigned later, a few days later, by the council?
So it's a duty which I think falls upon anybody who has that information. So if I was in receipt of that information, I would pass it to the school, and my staff would pass it to the school as well. So we're reliant upon schools to facilitate a transfer of information in whichever way they see is most appropriate to do so. If we have it in the local authority, we pass it to the receiving school.
So I think you say in your statement the responsibility is on schools, but you provide support if requested. Presumably that's
Absolutely.
the part of what your answer is referring to. Is there any part of Lancashire's role to ensure that schools have sufficient systems in place for transferring safeguarding or risk information? So
we have a role to ensure that all our schools operate in an effective and safe manner. So the regulator is Ofsted, who inspects our schools regularly. We have school advisors who are connected to our schools, who do work with our schools. If somebody raises a significant issue with us or an issue of concern, we will visit that school and do work with that school. So yes, we do have a duty to ensure that our schools are operating in the way which is expected by statute. And the nature of it is we have 628 schools across Lancashire. And 500 plus of those schools are maintained, so that where we are the employer in law, the rest are academy trusts. So, yeah, we have a duty to ensure that schools operate in a way which is acceptable. The minutiae of the safeguarding detail would come out through safeguarding audits we might do. So we do have a service level agreement with some schools for school safeguarding advice and guidance, and one of the things we offer is a safeguarding audit.
The oral evidence is still to come, but you would have read the statements about these transfers of information and the issues. Did those cause you concern?
It always causes me concern when I hear that information hasn't been passed with the child to the new school, because I think you're just not working with the totality of the nature of the need and the picture. I have worked with and alongside keeping children safe in education for a long time, giving advice to schools, and that's been in there for a long time. It would be my reasonable expectation that it was passed on with urgency to the new setting. So no, it is concerning whenever I hear that a file has not followed a child where there's significant safeguarding issues. So yes.
And given the council's role that you've said about ensuring safe ways of working, does that evidence cause you to consider whether there should be some sort of system of auditing or checks on the passing of this information?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we do, as we said, have a service level agreement with a number of schools where we can offer that audit facility, I suppose, process. I think in terms of the nature of our reliance upon the regulator, for example, of Ofsted. So part of Ofsted's framework is ensuring that safeguarding and what you've described as a system is appropriate and robust. And our schools are usually inspected every 3 to 5 years. Governing bodies will have training, from our governing body services on, what effective safeguarding is as well. So your point is a really good, clear point. I think the nature of it is that we do have to rely upon the regulator. We have to rely upon the governing bodies and the school leaders as well, just because of the sheer number of schools in Lancashire. I think it would be very difficult for us to audit every single school safeguarding arrangements across the whole of the county with the staff we currently have.
Yeah. So you've said, I think it already implicit in your answer that resources are tight and you simply don't have the resources to do this.
Absolutely.
Moving on to levels of attendance. You will have seen that AR's initial attendance at the Acorn School was for 2 hours a day, but the plan was to build that up by September 2019 to longer attendance. I think you recognise in your statement that's below the expectation for full-time education, which is usually set at 18 hours or more, correct?
Yes.
But you say, I think, that a lesser amount may be deemed suitable in certain circumstances. Is that right?
Yes.
And is this right? It's your view that given what AR had been excluded for, it was reasonable to build up his engagement?
I think it was reasonable for the head teacher to make a decision about what was appropriate at that time for his education.
That build-up was overtaken by events because AR returned to the range with a knife and struck a pupil with a hockey stick. During the police investigation, bail conditions were sent which actually precluded AR from attending the Acorns. Is that right?
Yes.
And Acorns also decided not to allow AR to return in any event until appropriate risk assessment had been carried out. Is that right?
That's correct.
Again, at your paragraph 22, I think you say that was an appropriate decision for the Acorns to take in the circumstances, given the safeguarding duty is to all children and staff in a school. Is that right?
That's what I believe, yeah.
Thank you. And you talk about the inability of educators to carry out a full risk assessment of AR, and I'm going to come on to grapple with that in a bit more detail. Nonetheless, was that situation consistent with the provisions of the guidance that we've looked at this afternoon?
So in the guidance, it does say that for short-term periods, a reduced timetable can be offered, usually with the agreement of parents, with an expectation for relatively prompt reintegration back into school full-time. The expectation for all children is that they have an appropriate full-time education, and that's been reiterated across many different bodies for a good number of years now. One of the reasons for that is because it was apparent that many children, a number of children were not in receipt of a full-time education when they revised the guidance. It is very difficult sometimes, though, to offer a full-time education to some children. And actually, what has been described in the legislation is where there is an intensity of tuition or provision, so small groups for very short periods of time, it can add up to what might constitute the equivalent of a full-time education, but it would be very short term. I think the nature of the circumstances here were that there was a number of things in play, my reading of it, which people needed to ascertain before they integrated the pupil into the school fully.
I think you will have seen a note of the strategy meeting on the 6th of January 2020 where Miss Oates, who was a member of LCC staff, described the arrangement as illegal. Mm-hmm. So it's LCC 4031, page 2.
Thank you.
It appears you don't agree with that description.
I'm not saying I don't agree with it. What I'm saying is that if, in terms of following the guidance, it had been short-term with a plan of reintegration, with the agreement of parents, it does fit the description and the guidance. I think it would be seen to be necessary for a short term. The description of illegal, I think, is referencing to the concern which has been evident for a long time about children not being in school, not being seen, not in receipt of a full-time education. And I think it's common for people to refer to part-time timetables being outside of the statute and the legislation. So that was my interpretation of it.
So it's outside the statutes, but is this right? The obligation is on Lancashire County Council to ensure it stays within.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for a short term, there might be an element of discretion in the guidance, but
That's
in the
true.
long term...
In the long term, we want children to be back in school full-time.
Could we have up, please, Kate Dixon's statement again, which is DFE 30256. Thank you. Page 24, paragraph 79. So AR's level of attendance at the Acorns varied over the time that he was there. It coincided obviously with COVID, but he also engaged at varying levels throughout. And this is a broad summary from Miss Dixon. But she says that prior to the exclusion and move to the AP, his attendance was good, but it rapidly fell at the Acorn school and worsened further after the COVID lockdowns in 2020. Of some concern is the fact that a large proportion of the absence from Acorn school was classified as other authorised absence. At the time, schools did not have a separate attendance and absence code for part-time timetables, which may be one of the reasons for such a large number of other authorised absences. Is this right, that quite a high percentage of AR's attendance was what's called other authorised absence?
Well, that's what I understand. Yeah, I've not seen the register entries.
But I think Miss Dixon might be sounding a word of caution with that and saying that that actually might have been part-time learning. Is
It
that
might
right?
well have been, yes.
Such a high rate of absence should have been seen as a risk factor and reported to the local authority via a statutory attendance return in line. It's right, isn't it? Lancashire was aware of this
Yes.
at the time.
Yeah.
And then she finally says it's unclear whether the local authority took action to investigate the high levels of non-attendance and put in place any necessary support at the time. Do I summarise this fairly? That the lack of attendance or this issue was known about by Lancashire County Council, correct?
Yes.
But was any necessary support put in place?
Not that I'm aware of.
So, by way of example, at that 6th of January meeting, one thing that was mentioned was the idea of a possible one-to-one tutor. That might have been something that could have filled the lack of attendance by AR, is that right?
Absolutely.
And that was also, I think, suggested by the rapid review that was carried out after the attack.
Absolutely.
But that was never provided by LCC, and I think Miss Hodson says in her statement, so paragraph 23, that she tried at first to source a specialist teacher with funding from LCC, but was unable to do so. Have you seen that?
I don't think I've seen that, no.
Fine. That's what she says. I'm not
Okay,
sure it needs to be
thank
pulled up on screen, but it might, well, you've, I think, fairly accepted that the necessary support was not put in place.
Yes.
Do you accept that that was a fundamental gap in AR's education at this time?
So I would always accept that if there's a requirement for a child to have a full-time education and we can bridge that gap, that we should try to do that at all possible opportunity. So that's what I would expect today from my teams. So yes, it would be a gap.
Yeah. So, I mean, illegal is perhaps quite strong language, but is this right? I mean, Lancashire wasn't complying with its statutory obligations.
In terms of ensuring a full-time education for children who, for reasons of illness or otherwise, couldn't attend school, yes, so that's true.
Yeah. And can you help us why that was?
I'd be speculating because I wasn't there at the time and wasn't dealing with the case. I think one of the reasons, if we're looking at similar cases, they would be lack of resource and lack of ability to commission that sort of provision, find suitable people to deliver it within the timescale, and just the sheer numbers of children where that might be applicable to them at any given point in time.
Yeah. So we've already addressed, I think, that there was a kind of requires improvement
Absolutely.
notice on Lancashire, so those issues were writ large. But I mean, it might be thought quite shocking that the provision wasn't in place and that was known, but nothing could be done about it.
No, I agree. And the aim is always to provide a full, satisfactory education provision for children who aren't in receipt of a full-time education. And it's not something that we want to happen. Sometimes it does happen, and we find out about it a little bit later on and put it in place. But you're absolutely right. It is a gap, and I absolutely have put measures in place to make that better since I've been in Lancashire. I think one of the things is that we talked about resourcing, we talked about ability. One of the things which we didn't routinely have in Lancashire as well, which is in the statement, is regular attendance updates from all schools. So you had to ask schools for it, so therefore you relied upon schools to tell you that children were not attending.
Sorry to interrupt, but that wasn't the case with the Acorn School, was it? There was pretty regular...
So there's regular communication, but there wouldn't have been regular electronic communication of their registers to us, which is what we received today.
Understood. But of course, for a Lancashire child, the council has to make sure that it gets that information.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to touch on risk assessment because I think you've identified that one of the barriers to Acorns having AR back was a lack of risk assessment, and I think you suggest that MAPA might have been the organisation that could have done that, but you, I think, fairly accept that you're not an expert in MAPA, so that's perhaps a matter for others. But the guidance, as I think you've acknowledged, gave a discretion for MAPA to take on a person that was convicted if they were capable of causing serious harm to the public. Were you aware of that?
I was aware of that, yeah. And my mention of that was because my reading of the information when I read through it all was that people were desperate for somebody to make a judgment about the level of appropriateness of that placement, and couldn't find anybody who was able to give assurance in the detail which they want. But that's just my reading of what I saw in emails and paperwork.
So I think that's something that would have to be identified, MAPA, by the youth offending team. So
it would be
perhaps a matter for something else. But from your experience, do you suggest MAPA because you're familiar with it being adopted in situations such as this?
So I'm only familiar with it in being adopted in situations from my previous work. In another local authority. I haven't come across it in Lancashire because I wouldn't be in that space. But it is a mechanism for assessing risk. And when I was thinking about who might successfully assess the level of risk, I was thinking about a multi-agency risk assessment. So taking the responsibility away from our member of staff in an organisation was my thinking. But as I said, I'm not an expert in that, but I do know that those sorts of multi-agency assessments of risk do take place. And from my reading, I thought that might have been one of the places you might have found enough expertise to be able to assess the risk, but I was speculating.
Yeah, so you'll understand these are issues that the inquiry is grappling with.
Absolutely.
As to who is the appropriate person to carry out the risk assessment. And
Absolutely.
Is this right? Your reading of the evidence was that the schooling, and we'll hear perhaps from Miss Hodson, wanted someone to do that and no one was stepping in to do it.
I read that very clearly. That was my interpretation of the information.
And putting aside MAPA, in your experience, would the council have any role in carrying out that risk assessment?
No, not in my experience, no. I don't think we have staff who are able to step into that space professionally, reliably, and sort of absolutely say that was the case. No, I don't think so.
And in your role now, do you see cases where another organisation does step in Lancashire for similar circumstances?
I haven't recently, no. I think we're always working with other agencies to compile relevant information about levels of risk, because we do place children, as I said, in pupil referral units and special school settings very regularly. What we rely upon is a amalgamation of information from different sources to make that judgment, and it's often a paper-based exercise as well at a panel. So, but no, I think that's an area which needs to be developed and looked at in terms of assessing the risk about placing young people in settings.
I want to turn, please, to the EHCP. So it was decided, or it was suggested as something that would be necessary at the 6th of January 2020 strategy meeting again, correct?
Yes.
But the process had to be undertaken, and it wasn't finalised until the 6th of August 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, my understanding, yeah.
There were indications that AR, for example, might have autism before January, months before January 2020.
Yeah.
From the papers you've reviewed, did you identify any moment where it appeared to you that that was the sort of moment where Lancashire would normally see an EHCP being opened?
So I haven't seen the detailed information about the information which was submitted in terms of respect of the request for an EHCP assessment. My understanding of it is that EHCPs are requested at different points in time for lots of different children for various different reasons. And it may be, you know, that at a point of exclusion, somebody decides that their special educational needs are such that they need an education, health and care plan. I wouldn't want to make a sweeping statement about whether it was appropriate or not, because I think you need to be cited on all the information in front of you at that point in time to be able to make that judgment.
Thank you. We will ask the question of other witnesses. The 2020 EHCP of August stated that the educational placement was to be a local authority maintained secondary school, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And there's also, I think, a statutory presumption of mainstream schooling for an EHCP, and that was also the request of AR's parents, and we've seen the statute around that.
Yeah.
But we've also seen the statute which said that the council's not, the statutory guidance, which said that the council's not obliged to provide the school that's requested by the parents, where the school named as a school or other institution that's unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude or special educational needs of the child or young person concerned. AR being excluded for carrying the knife. I think you've acknowledged that in those circumstances it is very difficult for a student to go back into mainstream schooling. It's been suggested by Miss Hodson that he wouldn't have been accepted. But in those circumstances where the EHCP was going to make a recommendation for a schooling which was unlikely to come to pass, shouldn't those at Lancashire County Council looking at this have stepped in and said it wasn't a suitable placement?
Yeah, potentially. And the law is such that if a school or we decide that the school is unsuitable for the special educational needs, age and aptitude of the child, or it's not a good use of public resources to send the child to that school, parents can still request that. And we would then go through mediation and or to a tribunal if we disagreed at that point in time. So it's always a delicate balancing act between what parents want, what we think is right, what they're able to request in law, and what the tribunal may or may not uphold, and that's pure speculation. As I said, I wasn't cited on the information which was used to make that decision about the recommendation at that panel, which they would have done as to why mainstream was most suitable. What we go off when we're making a recommendation is all the advice that comes in from the school, from health professionals, social care professionals, and so on and so forth, and make a decision. And I go back to my point as well that there are children who are successfully placed in mainstream schools with significant factors in their lives, and some are successful, others are not. Yeah. If
we play it forward, what happened was that eventually in late 2021, so a year and a third or so afterwards, the conclusion was changed that AR should move to a special school.
Yeah.
And following that, a placement was found at Pressfield, and that was started in April 2021.
Yes.
The consequence of the EHCP naming a mainstream school when that was unlikely meant that AR was at the Acorns for much longer than he should have been. Do you agree?
So I do agree from what I've read from the documentation. I think not having seen the pupil in school and not being the head teacher, offering that information up to the local authority about what's suitable at that point in time. I think it'd be wrong of me to make an absolute judgment about it. But the toing and froing of education, health and care plans, which school is most appropriate, is common in the system. And parental preference, we have to listen to parental preference as well. We have to listen to lots of professionals. So it wouldn't be uncommon, but I absolutely take your point that an earlier placement in a specialist provision may have benefited.
Of course, between that 2020 and 2021, LCC had the obligation under the EHCP to find a place in mainstream school. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at the chronology, I can't see much evidence of that actually taking place. Is that right?
In terms of finding a placement within a mainstream school. So I think the obligation is dual. So the obligation falls upon parents as well, that they are entitled to, any parent or parents or guardian is entitled to apply for any school place at any time in the career of the educational career of that young person. So we would be seeking a placement for them, but equally parents could request a placement at a school as well, which outside of the education, health and care plan process would just navigate the standard admissions process.
But again, perhaps differentiating practice with what was required under the statutory guidance, there was an obligation on the council, wasn't there, to find that mainstream schooling?
So there's an obligation placed upon the council to ensure the child is attending, has an education, and the education, if they're attending a school, should be full-time.
Sorry, under the EHCP?
Under the Education, Health and Care Plan. Yeah. So there's a requirement for us to find an education placement for that child which is suitable for that child's special educational needs and disabilities. Yeah. And the presumption in law is mainstream, but we would find a placement suitable.
The EHCP said that the provision was going to be a mainstream
So we would
school.
consult with all mainstream settings until we found a suitable placement, and if no mainstream setting said that they felt that they could meet the needs of the child, then we'd have to search further afield or direct that school to admit.
But have you been able to find any evidence that that actually happened?
No, I haven't seen any.
Could we have up, please, Miss Hodson's statement? It's LCC 201773. Thank you, and it's page 77, paragraph 292, so the bottom of the page and going over the next. So she says that she recognised that they're not a special school, and it was clear right from the very beginning that AR was extremely unusual and we were not the right setting. This was discussed at the Forensic CAMS meeting on the 1st of January 2020. They agreed that he needed a specialist setting, but said, "You've been left holding the baby." That's exactly how it felt. That it took from January 2020 until January 2022 to find a specialist provision, delayed because of the parental preference for mainstream education, highlights a shortcoming in the EHCP process. There was a dearth of available guidance, policy or support for how to deal with a situation like AR, and then she says we wouldn't have foreseen an attack. You must find that characterisation quite concerning. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I do, and I think the process around finding suitable placements for children with an education, health and care plan is very difficult.
If the matter had been grasped and progressed, alternative provisions could have been, for example, specialist schooling at an earlier stage than January 2022, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, possibly.
Tutoring.
Yeah.
And what other provisions could have been put in place?
So we have a range of available options, as in we can find a maintained special school, we can find an independent special school, we can commission tutoring, or we can commission an alternative provision setting which is not a pupil referral unit and not a special school, and then we can provide online education. We can provide a whole range of different educational options today. So in my working today, we have a range of different things. So there is a wide spectrum of things which could be provided. The issue there is availability of them or suitability of them at that time.
One other final issue with the EHCP is that the extent to which it passed on risk information about AR. So Ms Hodson talks about the EHCP being risk information being taken out because AR's father, and also, she says, with the intervention of CAM staff, wanted sort of concerning language, for example, use of the word sinister, about AR taken out of the EHCP, and she says that is what happened. On the other side of things, Miss McLaughlin of Pressfield School says that Pressfield wouldn't have accepted AR if it had known about the risk that he presented. You must agree that it was an unsatisfactory outcome that AR was eventually placed in a specialist school, but one which didn't deem him as suitable. To what extent should LCC have ensured that the EHCP gave a full picture of AR's risk?
So I thought about this long and hard, because the SEND Code of Practice details what should be in an education, health and care plan. It's very specific about it. And I looked for where you would include that level of concern about risk in an education, health and care plan. It's definitely not in the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice specifically as a phrase. The sections it would go in would be the first section about the young person, or potentially in the social care or health sections. I think the oversight really is that in the passing of the education, health and care plan to settings, without supporting safeguarding information, you can't make a rounded decision about the ability of that school to meet that child's needs if you're not cited on absolutely everything. So given that it's not in the SEND Code of Practice in detail, so it's not laid out about that high level of risk, I think that is a gap. But I also think that we do rely upon people to share safeguarding information confidentially for the benefits of safeguarding children in general. So I don't believe that an education, health and care plan was the vehicle for that, but I do believe that there should have been a wraparound composite of information around the education, health and care plan, or at least a conversation to be able to let people know the level of concern for people to be able to make a considered decision. I have thought long and hard about that legislation and whether it was appropriate for it to be in the education, health and care plan, because the purposes of an education, health and care plan is about educational provision. So I get both sides of it. But in terms of the striking information out of the education, health and care plan, there is guidance in the SEND Code of Practice about, with the consent of parents, around things such as social care information as well being shared in an EHCP. So I think it's very difficult, but I think it is a gap.
The sort of logical conclusion is, well, if there's a gap or if it's not in the EHCP, where should it be? And I think Ms McLaughlin talks about the fact that the safeguarding information would actually come at a later stage, normally after the place has been offered.
Yeah.
But should there not be a provision for a school to understand the risk that a pupil presents before they make that offer? Just think about the EHCP. Is it not an important feature of how someone is to be educated if they can't, for example, be in a classroom with other pupils?
No, it is, yeah. And I think there's nothing, as far as I can see in the law as well, which precludes one safeguarding professional speaking to another as part of that whole process. I haven't been able to find that as a notion that you shouldn't share that information. I think the legislation actually says the opposite, that you should be able to share safeguarding information confidentially for those particular reasons. So whether it had been in the education, health and care plan or not, I don't think it would be unfair to expect somebody to have had those conversations, but I wasn't having those conversations, and I don't know whether those conversations took place or not.
Understood. Moving on to Pressfield School, AR turned 16 in August of 2020. From that point, the council's obligations around the compulsory school obligation ceased, give or take the school terms. Yeah. But the council still had the statutory obligation to comply with the requirements of the EHCP, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Could we have up, please, your statement at page 16? So there's quite a lot of correspondence which underlies this, which we probably pick up with Miss Smith tomorrow. But you will have seen, particularly in putting together your chronology, that there was a series of correspondence from 2022 onwards from Pressfield School to the council. And do I characterise this fairly? Pressfield School was saying in quite strong terms, firstly, that AR wasn't engaging and wasn't intending.
Yeah.
And secondly, seeking the assistance of the council to carry out visits. And would you agree that they were frustrated with the responses that they received back from the council?
Absolutely.
And would you agree that in reality, nothing of substance actually seemed to come back from the council to help with this problem?
I agree.
From page 16, and I think the third bullet point from the bottom, you go through a series of issues which I think are taken from the rapid review in the way that the council handled AR's placement at Pressfield. So you talk about January 2023. No alternative provisions were explored. It was felt that Pressfield had not provided good enough evidence that they were unable to meet the need. It was noted that as AR was not on the roll, he may have been treated as much of he may not have been treated as much as a priority. The learning was that if AR was not attending, further placements should have been sought. So
I agree.
Underlying that, was there a kind of misconception by council staff that because AR was not of compulsory school age, there wasn't an obligation to provide educational provision?
Well, it's possible, but I'd be presuming that from, because I wasn't the decision maker at that point in time. I think it's fair to say that we should have put more in place or more consideration around alternatives at that point in time. Everything around an education, health and care plan is done through a process of review. So we should have been reviewing the education, health and care plan as to whether it was still suitable and whether the placement was still suitable at that time.
And again, in this period of time, there was actual confusion, wasn't there, as to whether AR was on the roll for Pressfield or not?
Absolutely.
And again, would you agree that that is a most unsatisfactory place to be in, where it's not known whether a pupil is actually on the roll at a school or not?
Totally agree.
There was a disagreement between the two parties, Pressfield and the council, as to whether that was in fact the case, and the council asked or forced, is this right, Pressfield to take AR back on the roll?
So my understanding is that was the request which was made, that the education should be provided. If a school is named in a school or college is named in an education, health and care plan, it's named until that placement is changed or that EHCP ceases. And that's the nature of it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have reviewed that if the college was saying that they couldn't meet the needs of the pupil. I think that should have been the case, that we should have done a review, looked at everything in the round again, compiled more information and looked for alternative placements. Whether an alternative placement or provision would have been possible or available or right at the time, I can't say, but I think that's what should have happened at that point in time.
Yeah. Just thinking about visits, it doesn't appear that the council had any ability to carry out visits at all at that time, is that right?
No, that's true.
We see that actually workers from Sefton Council carried out a visit even though it wasn't their obligation to do so.
That's correct.
Why is it that Sefton was able to provide that service and Lancashire wasn't?
So I'm speculating again, but my current understanding of the staffing at that point in time was there was very few people in the attendance team at Lancashire County Council. It's still a very, very small team for a large county.
And we perhaps see that in the wording of Miss McLaughlin in her statement, where she says, in my view, the support from Lancashire County Council was virtually non-existent, and they did not attend AR case annual reviews. Do you recognise that?
I recognise that, yeah.
The upshot of that was that there was a further 2-year period where AR had next to no educational provision, correct?
Correct.
So he had no purposeful activity in that time, at least from an educational perspective.
That's what I can ascertain from the information, yeah.
And again, you will have ascertained that he became increasingly isolated in this period, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And of course, he was, during that period, left spending large amounts of time online.
Correct.
Are you able to help us with how that could have come to happen? Is it? I know you've said lack of resources, but did the council
In terms of being without an education for a long period of time, without somebody determining that something different needed to be done.
Yes.
Well, I think I've highlighted in my evidence, haven't I, a lack of resource and a lack of people available to do annual review processes and to work, alongside the professionals who are educating those children to make sure that it was appropriate. There is, and this is within the SEND inspection reports from Ofsted, a significant backlog of annual reviews and education, health and care plan applications. So regrettably, having looked at the information, I think that was down to a lack of resource and a significant increase in work for that workforce available at that time.
Was there also a lack of professional grip, though, by those that were working and had oversight of the case?
I don't think I can say that without seeing more information than I've seen about those conversations, and actually I haven't spoken to those individual workers about what was happening at that time.
But you have looked back at the correspondence and you will have seen fragmented responses whereby the school are passed on to another team within the council, or there's no response to an email simply because someone appears to have left their role and perhaps not provided a redirecting address.
Yeah.
I understand staff might have been overfaced, but wasn't there a fundamental issue here?
So I don't disagree with you at all. I think that the nature of the circumstances could have been different, could have been better, and I think if we were to think about what could have been provided, which wasn't provided, then there could have been a different educational provision in place.
Can we talk about that then, please? What alternatives were available?
Well, I think this is where it becomes quite difficult because, as I said, in Lancashire we have 29 or so special schools, so we've got a significant minority of provisions in Lancashire which are special schools. We have to use significant independent special school places. So we spend over £50 million a year on independent special school places for children in Lancashire. Obviously, we've got the pupil referral units, which we could have used, so, and then online tutoring, one-to-one tutoring and alternative provisions. So the likelihood is it would have been extremely difficult to find something within reasonable travel distance suitable to the level of educational need and special educational need, which was not something which we call education other than at school, which I think from my reading would have been wholly unsatisfactory at that point in time to put in place an online education. So my current workings is it's very difficult to find a very specialist provision outside of special schools. The nature of it is that there's high demand for all the special school places. Some would have been wholly unsuitable and some would have been very far away. To travel from one part of Lancashire up to the top of Lancashire is going to take about 90 minutes to 2 hours to get there. So we've got a big breadth as well across the width of the county and into other local authority areas. So in an ideal world, we'd have been able to find something, but my daily lived experience is of great difficulty finding suitable educational placements.
So it's hard to know what should have been offered exactly at the time and what the response would have been if it had been offered. But there were options that were available.
There would have been
no offer
options.
was made at all, correct?
There would have been options available at the time,
And it's possible, isn't it, that some of those options would have certainly reduced the isolation that AR had at this time?
That's absolutely possible, yeah.
You set out your reflections at paragraph 19 of your statement, and you refer to now that there's live school attendance data which the council has, correct? Staffing levels have been improved, is that right?
So there's approximately 50% more people in the SEND team than there was when I started in February 24. The children missing education teams and elective home education teams have still got small numbers of staff in them, but they've got double the number of staff, albeit starting from a very low base point. So we have invested quite heavily in staffing in Lancashire County Council. Do we need more staff? Categorically we do, because the level of need has grown exponentially. But we've invested in new systems and processes and practices. I'm a relatively new leader to the local authority and have brought some different ways of doing things. So in terms of, better data, more oversight, more people in the system, it's definitely developing. I wouldn't say it was perfect at all. And going back to your point about the improvement board, that's overseen by an independent chair of the DFE against what's called a priority action plan, to put in place those things which were deemed to be significant failures at the inspection of December 24.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Those are my questions. I just look to see if anyone else has any.
That was a lot of evidence, Mr. Turner. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
You're now free to go.
Thank you.
So the next witness is Mr. McGarry. I'm not sure whether we might need to rise to swap.
It would probably be merciful to the stenographer.
Oh yes, you're quite right. We're probably at about the right time anyway.
Yeah. I'll sit again at 25 past.
Thank you.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Mr. Boyle.
Could you give your full name, please?
Michael McGarry.
Thank you. You are head teacher at the Range School in Formby.
At Range High School, yes.
Thank you very much. Could we have up, please, RAN 4039? Do you recognise that as your statement?
I do.
Thank you. We see the date of the 19th of August 2025. Is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. You've also provided a statement to the police following the 2019 hockey stick incident that we'll come to, which is MERP 202902, and also a statement to the police after the 2024 attack, which is RAN 4026. And you've been able to review those before giving evidence?
Yes.
That's correct. And are you happy that those are true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. I understand there's something that you wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd just like to begin by expressing my condolences, especially to the families of Elsie, to Alice and to BB, and to also express sympathies to all children who were affected and families affected by the tragic events.
Thank you very much.
Mr. McGarry, before you became head teacher at the Range High School, that you were associate principal at the Belvedere Academy in Liverpool for 11 years and deputy head teacher at Fred Longworth in Wigan for 5 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you were appointed head teacher of the Range High School in September 2019?
That's correct.
Thank you. The Range has, you tell us, 1,100 pupils aged 11 to 19?
Yes.
Thank you. In terms of the type of pupil, if I can put it that way, on the roll, does the Range have any sort of specialism in terms of the pupils that it takes on?
No.
Thank you. So, in terms of pupils with special educational needs, for example, is there any sort of specialism in that respect?
No specialism. We do have children who have special educational needs, some of whom have a statement or an educational healthcare plan, but there's no specialism in that area. We're a mainstream school.
Thank you. When you took over in September 2019, what was your impression of how the school was running? Were there any issues that arose quickly on your desk?
I had been aware of the school. The school had had an Ofsted inspection in 2018, and there had been some issues identified by Ofsted at the time. So I was aware as the new head teacher what my main tasks were in trying to drive an improvement agenda across the school. It was around, there were some relationship issues amongst some of the older students, and some other systemic things around teaching and learning that needed some careful work as well.
In terms of the issues that we'll come to for AR, were any of those wrapped up in that Ofsted assessment?
Not particularly, no.
In terms of systems that were in place for safeguarding, how did you assess those when you joined in September 2019?
Good, fine, and even with the 2018 report, Ofsted in that report were critical of certain areas, but safeguarding certainly wasn't one of them.
And how was safeguarding information recorded at that time?
Through a safeguarding log. There were pastoral leads of the school. There was a house-based system in the school at that time, and safeguarding concerns would have been passed to them. There was also a designated safeguarding lead appointed, a member of the senior staff at the time I got there, and they would have been responsible for the day-to-day safeguarding matters, as well as myself, ultimately, as the head teacher of the school as well.
So we'll come, of course, to Mr. Cregeen's evidence as designated safeguard lead. But do I understand your evidence that is it the house log that recorded safeguarding information?
Yes.
Thank you. AR's behaviour in years 7 and 8. So AR enrolled as a year 7 pupil on the 4th of September 2017, so before your time, correct?
Correct.
But you've been able to review his records and also speak to your colleagues about his time at the school?
Yes.
Thank you. And you tell us at your paragraph 12 that his attendance remained excellent throughout. Is that right?
98% in year 7 and approximately 95% in year 8, which are very good figures.
And we'll look perhaps at the various incidents with Mr. Cregeen, but until October 2019, his behaviour hadn't triggered any suspensions or exclusions, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. You say that he could be distracted and receive detentions, but that wasn't out of the ordinary.
Correct.
There is a reference in the papers, which I think you acknowledge at your paragraph 75, to AR being verbally bullied in April 2019. I think you say that that appeared to be an isolated incident. Is that right?
Yes.
And you also go on to say that no concerns over bullying were raised with the school from AR, his parents or others prior to September 2019, perhaps with that absence.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. And is this right? From what you've read, none of AR's behaviour suggested that he was being bullied?
Correct.
There was an incident in June 2019 where AR made comments about jihad and referred to the Manchester Arena bombing as a good battle. That happened again before your time, but you've been able to read or find out about that, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And your, I think, explanation at paragraph 20 is that as an isolated incident with no other factors causing concern, you wouldn't necessarily have expected further action to be taken. Is that right? That's
correct, yeah.
Do you agree that that was a worrying comment, regardless?
In the context of it being an isolated incident, no. Children will, at times, especially children of a younger age, can say things sometimes for attention. They've heard something on the television, something from the internet. And as long as there isn't a pattern that's starting to emerge of behaviour and comments like that, it should be dealt with. And even as an isolated incident, it should be dealt with. But unless there's a pattern develops, it's not really something that would raise too many red flags.
That wasn't, I think, recorded at the time that it happened. I'm just going to come up to some other records, but we might come back to that. Before I ask you about Year 9, can I just ask you about internet usage at the range, please? The school had, I think, acceptable use policies and e-safety policies, correct?
That's correct.
And you tell us at your paragraph 49 and onwards about software that was used at the range. And is this right? It was in place at the time that you joined?
The Impero software, yes, it was.
Thank you. And is this right? It allowed the teacher to monitor and control students as they used computers?
That's correct, yes.
And so, in addition, devices were monitored in real time for the words and phrase typed, is that right?
That's correct.
So if a violation was flagged, so in other words, an inappropriate phrase seemed to be typed, the IT team would check the screenshot and to see whether it was actually a concerning thing that was typed.
That's correct, yes.
And if that did happen, it was to be raised with the head of house and the safeguarding lead, correct?
Correct.
And is this right? The system now in place uses an AI evaluation of things that have been typed?
Yes.
Thank you. And you tell us that there weren't any reports flagging AR's use whilst he was at the range.
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to Year 9, I think there were 2 incidents in September 2019, one where AR hit another student during an English class and another where he made the comment, "That's why teachers get murdered during a detention." We'll pick up those incidents with Mr. Cregeen. I think you say that you first became aware of AR's adverse behaviour in October 2019. Is that right?
That's correct.
So those September incidents hadn't been enough to come onto your desk?
No, not at that time, no, because of his previous record as well.
And you describe what you call a marked and rapid escalation in AR's behaviour in October 2019 at paragraph 15, correct?
Correct.
So on the 7th of October, there was a fight in an English lesson with another student.
That's right.
And you received, I think you might have been off the school, but you received a call and you asked for both boys to be sent home to investigate what happened. Is that
yes.
right? Presumably the incident must have been relatively significant for you to be put on notice and send both boys home?
Yes.
Are you able to remember anything more about it?
Well, it would be very unusual for a fight between 2 boys to take place in the classroom environment where there's an adult there teaching the class. And when I took the phone call, and it had appeared that it was serious, it was quite serious, and I was concerned to get the 2 boys off the school premises to make the parents aware as soon as possible that we would be investigating it, and I was concerned for their safety, and that's why I wanted them sent home as soon as possible.
We mentioned that the June 2019 Manchester Arena comments weren't recorded on the house log, and I think it's right, this incident wasn't recorded either. Is this right, that it's a requirement for safeguarding information to be recorded in writing under the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance?
That's correct, yes.
So these incidents should have been recorded, is that right?
Yes, the June 19 incident, there was a different DSL in place at the time who had retired that summer. So I'm assuming that she would have been in receipt of that information and would have dealt with it, but it wasn't on the record at the time. We subsequently came in to that knowledge a bit later on because the teacher reported it again when the incident with AR took place in the school, and that's when the current, who was then the current DSL, logged it on the register then. So
Mr. Cregeen's predecessor knew that AR had come into the school with a hockey stick, and that prompted the issue to be raised with school staff?
Yes, the teacher who had originally raised it,
Understood.
yeah, with the DSL who was in post in June 19, That would have been down to that person to log it. Why it wasn't logged, I don't know. They since had retired. But when the incident happened with the hockey stick, the teacher came forward again to say, I had asked for this to be recorded.
Yeah, I think it's the RE teacher.
Yes, the RE teacher,
Yeah.
that's right.
Were you aware of any sort of substantive issues with record keeping when you took over?
Not. The school had introduced, following the Ofsted 2018 report, had introduced several new behaviour systems and had introduced a new system called class charts, which was an electronic system. And rather than it being a series of sort of 4 different house logs of things being recorded on a spreadsheet, it was a much more sophisticated system to allow sharing of information across the school much easier.
But is this right? Was that system in place after the events that we're talking about?
Yes.
So the system is now improved. At the time, there clearly was the possibility of oversight.
For that June 19 recorded incident, yes.
And the September incident as well?
The September incident was recorded on his log.
At the time?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, we might come back to that.
Okay.
That evening, Mr. Cregeen was contacted by PC McNamee, stating that the school had received an email from Lancashire Police notifying us that they had visited AR following a knife crime concern reported to them by Childline, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. That was forwarded to you that evening, and I think Mr. Cregeen called you as well, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
AR was already temporarily excluded at that stage, and is this right? You asked for AR and his parents to attend the school the next day to investigate that police report?
That's correct.
But you weren't present the next day, but is this right? AR attended with his father?
That's correct.
Thank you. And you subsequently learned that AR had brought in the knife and he said it was to stab someone because he was tired of being pushed around, correct?
Correct.
The next day, so the 9th of October, you made the decision to permanently exclude AR on the basis, was that on the basis of this report and the fight in the classroom?
The fight in the classroom, no. Much lower level tariff would have been in terms of a sanction put in place if it was just that. The permanent exclusion was solely down to the fact that he admitted to bringing a knife a number of times into school and potentially would have used it.
Thank you. Just before we pull up the letter, could we just go to page 5 of your statement, paragraph 25? Sorry, I did say I would come back to the point about the recording. It's paragraph 25. You talk about the 7th of October fight and you say, aware that the incident's not recorded in the house log. Do you see that there?
So this isn't the September incident. This is referring to the.
Did I have the wrong date? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Could we have up, please, MERP 201170? And could we look at the first substantive paragraph, please, of the letter? This is your letter to AR's parents, communicating your decision to exclude. You recognise that that might be upsetting for AR and the family, but you say the decision hasn't been taken lightly. Excluded due to the fact that he admitted being in possession of a knife over a prolonged period. He also claimed that he was quite willing to use it if he thought it necessary. I deem this completely unacceptable when considering the safety of AR and all other members of the school community, correct?
Correct.
In terms of exclusion decisions that you have made, where did this sit in the range? Was it a difficult decision?
It's always a difficult decision to come to the conclusion that you need to permanently exclude any child. But in going through very carefully the guidance that's laid out to schools and head teachers, I found the actions extremely dangerous, and I was not willing at all to take any risk for him, but most of all for the rest of the school community.
AR had the right to appeal that decision to the governing board's meeting, is that correct?
That's correct.
And he took that, or his family took that
They did.
opportunity. You may not have seen this at the time, but before that hearing, AR's father, Alphonse R., wrote to PC McNamee, who handled the Childline call investigation. And can we have up that email, please? It's LANC 4069. And page 2. We have here the email, and if we could perhaps just highlight, thank you very much. Do you see the middle paragraph? As the logic can tell, AR knew that what he was doing was wrong, but also knew that the school was relaxed about fightings, intimidation, a really gang culture among students in the school. One must be terrified to carry a weapon knowing that it is extremely dangerous. However, he deserves credit to have reported himself to carry a knife, and with a second chance to say at the school if he wishes to. He's a good boy, I know him. He goes on to say, refer to a bullying culture, and says that the school's taken a shortcut option of punishing the victim. Do you recognise that characterisation of the school from Alphonse R?
I absolutely do not. There was, as I still am, I walked around school on a daily basis then, throughout the day, visiting lessons, out at lunchtime. Every now and again, things were happening in school, still do happen in school. I certainly don't recognise a gang culture. And I don't know how that could be true, because this family decided to keep their eldest child in the school. He was there before AR came to the school. He remained in the school after he had been permanently excluded. He was also a child who had complex needs, and he stayed right through for his sixth form education and did very well and went on to one of the country's best universities. So I certainly don't recognise.
Thank you, Mr. McGarry. Sorry, I just ask you not to provide any further detail on that. You're referring to Dion R. We have his statement. It's at IWS 4060. Could we have that on screen, please? And could we have page 6, paragraph 24? Thank you. If we could just expand paragraph 24, thank you very much. I'm asked to raise with you the contents of this paragraph. So what DNR says is he wonders whether the school tried to make an example of AR when they expelled him, rather than supporting him or trying to understand his situation. I say this because Range High School had received poor Ofsted ratings in December 2018, and there was a new head teacher, Mr. McGarry, who started in September 2019, who it was understood was trying to crack down on bad behaviour, including the carrying of knives, which I understood from friends was pretty common at our school. Just pausing there, just on whether it was common to carry knives at school. Was that?
Absolutely not.
Okay. However, I understood that typically if someone was caught carrying a knife, they got a detention or suspension. I did not know of anyone who'd been expelled for that before my brother. Are you able to comment on?
I had been appointed in earlier, obviously prior to September, as the new head teacher, and I'd visited the school on several occasions, spoke to the then current head teacher. No one had ever mentioned at any time, there was a problem at the school with a knife culture. Students I wasn't aware of anyone who'd been put out of the school for carrying a knife, and nor since has there been anybody suspended. And certainly as a head teacher and a senior leader for many years, a child caught carrying a knife in school, it would not equate to a detention or a suspension. It would 99 times out of 100 lead to a permanent exclusion.
So 6 years on, there's been no further suspensions for carrying of knives?
No.
And sorry, putting that a bit further, no one has been found with a knife, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. If AR had shown remorse for the carrying of knives into school, would he nevertheless have been excluded? Are you able to say?
I still would have made the decision to permanently exclude him, yes.
Thank you. Can we go please to the Governor's decision? So that's at 001170. And page 7. So we see here, I think, the list of attendees, the documentation, and you give an appraisal and background. Could we go over the page, please? In your account, you say at the top bullet point, AR appeared to show no remorse, regret, or emotion, as if this was a normal, proportionate reaction. Is that right?
That was correct, yes.
From what you knew, did you question whether he understood the consequences of his actions?
It was when he was questioned by my two colleagues, both assistant head teachers, they asked him about that, if he understood it. And to my knowledge, he said that he did.
Could we look at the bottom third of the page, please? The chair invited AR's parents to speak. Have you had the opportunity to look at the account that was given by AR's parents here?
Yes.
And in terms of the description of the bullying that they give, did you have any evidence to show that was the case?
Not on any kind of systematic basis, no. I understood that he was having name-calling, verbal abusive incidents with one boy in particular, and the school had investigated some of this. There were other incidents that had been investigated, but it was always, he was name-calling, they were name-calling. It was a bit of tit for tat.
In terms of the incidents that had been in September, October, is this right? Did AR's father suggest that AR was being bullied around those incidents?
AR's father suggested that, yes.
Yeah. I think you say that you were aware of both AR and the other pupil at the time that these reports came to you, correct?
Correct.
Obviously, without naming or going into personal characteristics of the other pupil, you say that you were concerned that they could have been bullying and you wanted to investigate that.
Correct.
Did you make any progress with that investigation?
It was really at the point where the fight had happened on the Monday, and that's the point where I felt we really need a deep investigation to look further into these allegations of bullying. But then it was subsequently that evening when it came to light from Childline and the police that the knife had been brought into school.
So it was overtaken by events?
Absolutely.
You say in your statement that the other pupil was excluded. Was that because the fight had happened or as a result of an investigation into whether there was bullying or not? No,
sorry, and it's probably a tad ambiguous in my statement. he was subsequently excluded, but it was some months after AR had been permanently excluded, and it was for an entirely different matter.
Thank you. Just looking at the bottom 4 paragraphs on that page, 4 bullet points on that page, there is, I think, a reference to AR being assessed for ADHD, said to be below the threshold for ADHD. And the next bullet point, seen a counsel who thinks he has autism spectrum disorder. And then Mrs. Alexander suggested that AR be assessed for ASD. That has not yet taken place. This is obviously the last stage of AR's days at the school.
Correct.
He only has, I think, that he comes off the roll once this decision is confirmed.
Yep.
And has 5 days before he moves on to the pupil referral unit, correct?
Correct.
Nevertheless, did that information cause any questions to arise for you as to whether the school ought to think about putting in place any kind of assessment for ASD or special needs assessment to help for the next school?
Well, for most of Year 7, and it was only the back end of Year 8 that some of his behaviours were starting to become a little concerning. And my understanding is that that's when parents had discussed with Range the possibility of assessments. Range with the Associate Senko, who's named there, she did the assessment, and he was found not to meet the threshold for it. There were other things were put in place. The counsellor referred to here is a school counsellor, so that was a Range strategy. And in having several sessions with that person, what came out of that was there's the potential of ASD, and that should be investigated further. And then we got into the new academic year, and that may have been picked up, but obviously other events overtook that.
Thank you. If we go, please, to the bottom third of page 9, we see the reasons for this decision in the bottom list. Bringing a knife into school for 10 days, along with AR's admission that he would have used it to stab. Lack of empathy is worrying. Admitted that he understood the seriousness of the situation. The safety of other pupils and all school community was compromised, and the risk assessment for all pupils in the school is the primary consideration. And then if we please go over to page 10, we then see the letter that was communicated to AR's parents, and if we look at the inset paragraph in the middle, it says the panel were particularly mindful of the overriding duty to keep safe all members of the school community. Clearly a situation in which a pupil brings a knife into school and states that he's prepared to use it compromises his safety and that of the rest of the school community. Is this right? AR's parents had a right to review this decision from an independent panel?
That's correct.
But they didn't take that opportunity.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Just in terms of information sharing then with the Acorn School. The Range High School wouldn't have known where AR was going to be placed at the time the exclusion happened, correct?
That's correct.
And I think you describe in your statement a process of sharing information with the local authority as an intermediary between the Range and AR's new school, correct? Yes. But are you aware that there was correspondence between the Range and Acorns direct about the sharing of information?
Later on after, but later after the exclusion.
Yeah. But could we please have up LCC 00136? LCC 2, sorry, did I say 3 zeros? I think it's 2 zeros, 1367. Sorry. Thank you. So there was correspondence to you from Lancashire County Council on the 9th of November informing you that the Acorns was the new school and asking you to transfer the common transfer file to the same establishment. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Can you recall that happening?
Yes.
Thank you. And in terms of information that would have been passed following that letter, are you able to remember what would happen, and if not, what would you have expected to be passed?
That the information was forwarded in the common transfer file. There's immediately after a permanent exclusion, there's local authority paperwork that has to be filled in with the child's details, reasons for the exclusion, a brief outline of perhaps any support that has been put in place, any contact with other agencies and so on. That's sent off to the local authority. After the 5th day, they then assume full responsibility for the education of the child. But there's that intervening period where they remain on the school's register to see whether or not the child's parents or guardians want to take it right through to an independent panel for review. That's the decision of the head teacher to permanently exclude. So that's why there's been the intervening time lag.
So that's why we see the letter comes a bit later.
Yes.
Thank you. There was information sharing later, as you say, and we'll hear from Mr. Cregeen, but I think he was contacted on the 21st of November by the Acorn School as a result of concerns they had about AR. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And I think it's a fair characterisation to say that before they contacted Mr. Cregeen, they knew about the reasons for the exclusion, but not about the history of fighting, the comments about jihad, which came a bit later in the Manchester arena, and the comment, for example, that was made about teachers being murdered. There was only quite a short delay between that letter and it being provided, but would you agree that it ought to have been provided when that letter was responded to?
Yes.
And
yep.
Are you able to say why there was albeit brief, failure to pass on that information?
I assumed it would have been in the common transfer file. I don't know why that information wasn't there. I have reviewed the information that went off on the day of the exclusion that went to the county council, along with copies of referrals that were made to CAMS and a MASH referral as well.
Again, only a short period, but clearly information was sent earlier in November, which wasn't complete. Is that a wider issue as far as you're aware? Are you confident that full information is provided when a pupil leaves the range?
I am certainly now, yes, with the advent of new electronic systems.
That's the class...
The class charts.
Class charts,
yep.
Thank you. In terms of the class charts, is that a different software used by the range to other schools?
Most schools use a system called CPOMs. It's just a different system that tallied well with other behaviour systems that we had in place at the school.
I want to move on, please, to the hockey stick attack on the 11th of December 2019. I'm not going to show the CCTV footage of it because it's distressing, but sir, for your review, it's MERP 008145. You've been able to view that CCTV?
I have.
Is it right? It shows that AR arrives outside the range in a taxi and he throws his bag over the fencing into the school grounds, tries to climb up the fencing but fails to do so, correct?
Correct.
His bag is picked up by a member of staff. AR manages to get into the school. He'd been excluded by this stage. Do you know how he did so?
He tailgated at the main entrance to the front of the school, where visitors obviously come and they sign in if they're coming to have a meeting. But sixth form students also would come in and can go in and out of the school that way. And if there were latecomers from anybody else in the school community, they would come in and sign in at that part of the school in the morning as well. So he tailgated on the back of someone who was signing in and got in through the door that way.
And I think you tell us the school's done a safeguarding audit and put in measures now to prevent that.
Correct.
AR was met by a teaching assistant and brought to the hall where you were delivering an assembly.
That's correct.
And the bag was given back to him, is that right?
Correct.
Did the teaching assistant know why AR had been excluded?
No, it wasn't the teaching assistant who had given him the bag. It was another member of teaching staff who had seen the bag lying on the other side of the fence. Sometimes students, because there's a bike park there, when they're parking their bikes in the morning, they will, and if a member of staff sees something like that, they will take it round to the main office of the school, which is what this teacher was doing. He happened to be passing. He had himself disguised as if he was in a school uniform. It was grey trousers. He looked like he was still, and it's a large school that the teacher himself had never taught him, so he wouldn't have realised that he had been permanently excluded or who he was. And it's my understanding that he said, "Sir, that's my bag," and the member of staff, trusting, gave him the bag back at that point. It was shortly after that that the teaching assistant, who did recognise him, stopped him and asked him what he was doing in the school premises.
Thank you. I don't think I hadn't seen evidence of this before, but you said that AR was wearing clothes that matched his school uniform.
It's certainly lower down. He had a yellow puffer jacket on him on the top, but from lower down, the grey trousers, the black shoes, he could have been mistaken for someone in school uniform with just a brightly coloured jacket on, as some of them sometimes will.
Okay, thank you. After the assembly, you had finished delivering the assembly, you saw AR, correct?
Correct.
You recognised him, approached him and said, asked him why he was there and said he was supposed to be at his new school, correct?
Correct.
What did AR do next?
He didn't really say anything. He wouldn't give me an answer, but he ran off from the assembly hall very quickly.
And did you follow him?
Yes.
And what did he go on to do?
He obviously knew his way around the school. I had asked the TA to go immediately and actually find Mr. Grigine or another senior member of staff, and also to call the police. I went off in pursuit of him. He came round a corridor. It was a busy point in school. The bell hadn't long gone. Children were making their way from the registration to their first lesson of the day. When he came round a corner, I was maybe 2-3 yards behind him, and there was a group of students coming towards him, which meant he couldn't easily get past them in the corridor because of the number of them. And that was at the point where he produced this hockey stick out from underneath the puffer jacket that he had on. He went to the students sort of stopped. I sort of realised then what was happening. He raised the hockey stick back as if he was going to swipe it towards these students. It hit another student, I believe, in the arm, the side of his neck, and that was just at the point when I got to him and sort of bear hugged him. And just at that point then another senior colleague arrived, the deputy head, and grabbed the hockey stick off him.
So we have the footage to show that moment, but is this right? He did strike the student on a number of occasions.
No, he didn't. He didn't strike on a number of occasions. He went to, I think, because he was. I don't know whether he was frustrated or not, or whether it was an attempt to get these students out of his way. But that was he went back, and in the coming back, in the swinging back, my recollection is that's when he hit the student who was here to the right of him. I don't believe he was deliberately trying to hit that student. The student was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but nonetheless was struck with it and was injured by it.
And there was more than one attempted strike, wasn't there?
Yes.
Thank you. We have the footage. AR was taken to your office. What did he say?
Very little. He was breathing very heavily. Not not really making any attempt. I was asking him what did he think he was doing, why was he doing this, did he realise, you know, the serious trouble, how he was putting himself and other people at harm. I wasn't really getting anything from him. Another colleague came in, the deputy head, and at that point he said that I was asking about the student who'd been hit with the hockey stick of the deputy head. Did he know about him? We knew the name of the boy. The deputy head had been to check that the boy was okay, and I was asking about him. At that point, he said some comment about he didn't mean to hit him. And we said, well, why were you here? And he made some utterances about that he was looking for the boy that he blamed as to why he had been permanently excluded from range.
Did he say that he wanted to kill the alleged bully? Or he wouldn't have used
That's
the word
my
alleged,
recollection
but the
of
name.
it, yes.
Yeah. And is this right? He was insistent that his actions weren't wrong and showed no sense that he thought that they were?
No sense of remorse or any wrongdoing in his part. That's my recollection.
The police were called, they searched AR's bag and found the knife.
That's correct.
What did AR say about the fact that he had a knife on him?
He didn't seem very concerned about it. There was no sense of shock. I remember being very shocked at what I seen the police had taken out of his rucksack, which was sitting on a large table in my office by this stage. They were already in possession of the hockey stick, and I just found his reaction quite bizarre. It was quite matter of fact.
What was the reaction of AR's parents?
His father, I had asked for his father to be called. Once I had him in my office and I knew that he was no longer any danger to anybody else in the school, I'd asked for his father to be called. He arrived when the police were in my office. When he came in, he sort of looked at the boy. He said his name, and it was kind of, you know, what have you done? And there wasn't really any reaction from AR. The police then started explaining to AR's father what was going to be happening, where they were going to be taking him. They decided at that point they were going to arrest him, and they were going to take him to be processed at St. Anne Street Police Station. Dad very quickly became quite argumentative and with the police about why were they doing that, and it wasn't convenient for him to be taken there. Why couldn't he be taken to somewhere closer to home? And again, I remember being quite shocked at this. And the policeman sort of remonstrated verbally a bit with Dad. And I remember saying to Dad, you know, do you realise the seriousness of what your son has done today? You know, to himself, but also to the school community here at Range. I didn't really get any reaction whatsoever. Again, he just kept on arguing with the police. And I think, but it is quite a number of years ago, I think the police officer threatened to arrest him if he didn't sort of change his attitude and stop arguing with him about what they were doing. And then very shortly after that, they took him out, put him in the car, and Dad went off in the car and followed them.
Did you ever hear it said that AR had a list of targets for the attack?
I've heard it said, but I've never seen such a list.
And sorry, heard it said at the school while preparing for this inquiry?
I just think in the number of things that have happened, certainly from the awful events of last year, you know, lots of. So I can't recall, but I've heard it said.
Thank you. Moving on to the 22nd of July, 2024. That was the last day of the summer term for the Range, correct?
That's correct.
Was the end of term date published on the Range website?
Yes, it was.
And what time were students due to leave that day? 12:30?
12:30, if memory serves me correct, yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Very grateful for your assistance. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank
You're
you.
now free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we could take a 5-minute break between witnesses and we will call Mr. Cregeen.
5 minutes, 20 past. Just remain standing for a moment. You'll need to take the oath.
Thank you. I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just start by giving us your full name, if you would.
My name is David Cregeen.
Mr. Cregeen, if we could look at the screen together, please, at RAN 4036. Do we see there your statement to this inquiry dated the 20th of August of this year?
Yes,
Statement to the inquiry, yes. And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are, sir.
We can also see at RAN 4035, please. If we just go to the next page, numbering slightly different from my version, we see an earlier statement that you gave to Merseyside Police dated the 17th of September 2024. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Cregeen, you made a correction in your inquiry statement. I think you may remember to one of the dates within that, but we can see that you signed that police statement confirming that that statement also was true to the best of your knowledge and belief.
That is
right?
correct, yes.
Thank you. Just turning to your background now, you're currently employed, as this writes, as an assistant head teacher in the Ballacameen High School in the Isle of Man.
That's correct.
Thank you. When AR first enrolled at the Range High School in 2017, you were teaching there. I think you were quite senior at the time. Were you head of one of the houses?
Yes, I was head of Weld House.
So Weld House. And that was AR's house?
That's correct.
Thank you. You held that role as head of house. Were you also a subject matter teacher?
Yes, I also taught as well, yes.
What was your subject?
Physical education.
Thank you. And you held that role as head of house until, I think, July 2019, when you joined the senior leadership team as an associate leader. Is that right?
That is correct.
As you explained in your statement, you held that role, but in September 29, as well as continuing as associate leader, you took on an additional responsibility as the designated safeguarding lead.
That is correct, yes.
Just help us with what the role of the designated safeguarding lead is.
Along with the head teacher, the role of the designated safeguarding lead is to have overall responsibility for safeguarding and the welfare of all of the students in your care.
Thank you. So we should understand that you had contact with AR in two slightly different roles, both involving some safeguarding responsibilities, I think. First of all, up until July 2019 as his head of house, and then from September onwards as the DSL.
Correct.
In terms of qualifications and specialist training, we don't need to turn it up, but you tell us in your statement that you had level 3 training in safeguarding from Sefton Borough Council. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you set out in your statement your familiarity with matters relating to safeguarding in the sense that you yourself gave training to other staff at the school.
Yes, that's correct, on an annual basis.
On an annual basis. Thank you. Completing the picture, I think in July 2020, you became an assistant head teacher.
Yes, that position was made permanent then.
Yeah. But you left the range in September 2022, heading to work in the Isle of Man.
That is correct.
We've heard about from our previous witness about the range high school in general terms. But tell us a little bit about the safeguarding systems. So during your tenure, when you took over as the DSL, you tell us in your statement that you expanded the framework. So what was it previously and how did you change it?
Prior to me becoming the DSL, we had the DSL who was an assistant head teacher, and there was the head teacher and myself as a deputy DSL. So I considered that team to be somewhat small and wished to expand the team, which we did by including other members of staff such as heads of year, as well as the assistant Senko as an additional deputy safeguarding lead.
Thank you. And did you bring in the heads of house to have a greater responsibility in safeguarding?
Yes, at the time, they were heads of house, but it then changed to heads of year, and the heads of year had safeguarding responsibilities as well. As I say, the team expanded. It was felt better that the respective head of year would deal with safeguarding matters, for example, attending core groups and conferences on my behalf, while I had an overall strategic view of safeguarding in the school.
Thank you. It's always difficult to make judgments on these matters, but you've obviously ensured by those changes that more teachers were involved in holding safeguarding responsibilities. Did you feel that there were shortcomings in the safeguarding system previously?
Not shortcomings, I just wanted to expand the team so we had a bigger safeguarding team, and also some members of staff, for example, as I said, the assistant Senko, because students with SAM might feel more comfortable approaching the assistant Senko about a safeguarding concern than other members of staff.
Thank you. In terms of record keeping in relation to that, I think at the time, as we've heard from Mr. McGarry, a spreadsheet was being used as a house log, and that was where safeguarding information was collated. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Would pupils tend to remain in the same house throughout their time at the school?
Most of the time they did, yes.
So was there any issue about it being house-based? Was that a problem in terms of staff having visibility of past issues on the house log?
Well, the access to the log was for myself and the assistant head of Weld House. Other people would not have had access to the log as main scale teachers know.
Did that create any difficulties in terms of visibility if that was safeguarding information?
No, the information was available to myself and my assistant, but also to members of the senior leadership team if they required to see the information.
So if there was, I'm not here raising any specific issue in relation to AR, so take it away from AR's immediate circumstances, but if there was an issue between two lads at the school in different houses, would a teacher who was seeking to deal with that be able to access both house records?
They would have had to have spoken to the relevant heads of house for information.
I think subsequent to that, was this in your time that they moved to the new system, which had a more sophisticated way of recording that and sharing that information? Yes,
I was part of the process of securing the class charts, additional software so that we could record behaviour and safeguarding incidents more effectively.
Yeah, and that's just an alternative to CPOMs that I think many other schools use, is that right?
Yes, we investigated CPOMs as well, but we felt that because we were using class charts anyway, it felt more appropriate to use the safeguarding element of the class chart software.
Thank you. We're not a trial. You've quite rightly been in the hearing room while Mr. McGarry was giving his evidence, but because you were at the school before he was, you've heard the questions that my learned friend Mr. Boyle asked. Can I understand from you what your sense was of the school generally at that time, 2018, 2019? Was there a problem with bullying generally?
Not with bullying generally. There was a particular issue with a year group that was identified by Ofsted. But following the Ofsted inspection, we put things in place to address that concern with that particular year group, but not with bullying.
Was that with AR's year group or a different year group?
No, it was a different year group.
And was that the issue into relationships between pupils that you're referring to there?
I can't remember what the issues were. There was problematic behaviour with a particular year group, but I can't remember the exact
That
nature.
wasn't his year group?
It wasn't his year group, no.
A problem with gang culture, as has been referenced later on by Alphonse R. Is that something you recognise?
No, certainly not.
Any sense of a culture of knife carrying or a problem with knife behaviour or knife crime at the school?
No, certainly not.
Other than AR, in the months or years before the incident in October 2019 and then in December 2019, had you been aware of any cases of other pupils found carrying knives?
Not to my knowledge in Weld House, no. I'm not sure whether there had been a previous incident where a student had brought a knife in, but I don't know the full details of that.
But certainly if it was suggested that students were, or a number of students were regularly carrying knives, that's not something that you recognise?
No, certainly not.
If there had been a behavioural problem, a cultural problem at the school with knife carrying, as a head of one of the houses, do you think that that is something that would have come to your attention?
I'm sure it would. I would be confident that the students would have reported concerns to us.
Thank you. May I turn then to deal relatively briefly, but in a little bit more detail than Mr. McGarry did, AR's behaviour in years 7 and 8. You tell us, Mr. McGarry did touch on this, that there was no difficulty with his patterns of attendance in year 7, that's 2017 to 2018.
No, attendance in year 7 was excellent.
I think no significant behavioural concerns at all in year 7, the academic year 2017 to 2018.
No, any interactions I had with AR were generally positive, talking about his extracurricular activities.
What were his extracurricular activities? Can you remember?
Yes, he had taken part in some film productions outside of school. I think he took part in something to do with children in need as well as a TV production. Thank you.
And then year 8, so that would have been the academic year 2018 to 2019. Attendance slightly lower, but still not problematic.
No, attendance was still good, around the 95% mark.
And what you tell us in paragraph 16 of your statement, RAN 4036, at page 3. In terms of behaviour, his end of year's assessment mentioned concerns over distracting other students or being distracted by other students, but this wasn't reported in all his subject areas. Is that right?
That's correct. It was only in some of the subjects, not all of them.
So one of those you detail in paragraph 17, which Sarah will put up for you. A student had told him that another student had used a derogatory and racist term whilst referring to AR. You asked the respective heads of house, so 2 other houses involved in that, to investigate this and report back. It was investigated, but the claim was not substantiated. Is that right?
That is correct.
You say, I'm unable to ascertain their responses on the house log, but it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for the follow-up and outcome to have been a conversation. And if there had been any further action required, that would have been recorded. So would this be fair? unclear what exactly had happened on that occasion. Yes?
In what way, sorry?
Well, unclear in that a concern had been raised that a pupil had said to AR that other pupils had been saying racist things about him, but that was not substantiated. So it was unclear whether that was true or not. An allegation had been made, but there was no evidence to back it up.
Now, from my recollection, the head of house who investigated that said that there was nothing further in there, nothing further to investigate. The claims were unsubstantiated.
Yeah. Would this be a fair summary that there was no indications that around that time, spring of 2019, so towards the latter half of year 8, there's no indications that that was a pattern of concern. That appeared to be an isolated complaint that was in fact unsubstantiated.
Yes, it was an isolated incident.
And so, as you tell us in paragraph 18, I think at the end of year 8, your assessment at that time was that he was overall a good student. He could be distracted. He got detentions for that, but that wasn't unusual.
That is correct.
Also in year 8, I think, towards the end of the year, as you tell us in paragraph 19 at the top of the next page, Sarah, AR was assessed for the possibility of having ADHD, and you say the results of this survey indicated poor behavioural traits rather than ADHD. Can you remember who did that survey?
If I remember, it was conducted by the assistant Senko.
Thank you. You say that was reported to AR's father, and he didn't agree with the outcome of the assessment. Can you remember anything more about that, why he didn't agree?
No, just he did not agree. He did not agree with our assessment that the issues related more to behaviour rather than ADHD.
Thank you. You'll be in for one moment. Do you remember an issue coming up still in year 8 about a concern about detentions and that issue being raised? I think it would have been the start actually of year 9 in September about detentions and social media concerns.
Yes, I can, yes.
So rather than bringing it up, it's quite difficult to read on our system. So there's an entry for the 7th of September 2019. So for your note, this appears in the House log, which is an Excel spreadsheet, RAN 4023.
Thank you.
So, oh, forgive me, it's the 9th of July. I was right the first time. It's the 9th of July. It's the American dating system, so it is the end of year 8. Mr. Boyle corrects me. The 9th of July, VA produced results from the ADHD survey completed by staff which showed poor behaviour, not ADHD traits. Dad was not convinced, so DC, you presumably,
That's for me, yes.
fed back key findings from AR's recent report that supported VA's findings. Dad felt AR was singled out. This was refuted. VA to spend some time with AR during detentions to review behaviour and progress, brackets mentoring. So just pausing there, that seems to be Alphonse suggesting that it was ADHD related, but the school having evidence that AR's recent report showed some behavioural issues, some detentions, and time was then going to be spent in AR's detentions to review his behaviour and try to give him mentoring and support about his behaviour. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, that's correct.
Then said, Dad not on SMHK. What's that a reference to?
That's Show My Homework, so that was a communication system with parents.
And then you, Mr. Quadrian, were to arrange that so that Alphonse could help AR get organised, reduce detentions, improve behaviour, etc. Then it said social media concerns discussed too, and printouts of AR's comments forwarded to Dad. Can you remember what the social media concerns were that were discussed?
No, I couldn't remember when I completed the statement for the police, so I have no recollection, sorry.
Thank you. There appears to have been a perception, perhaps from Alfonso, that teachers were unfairly targeting AR. Did you see any evidence of that?
No, several teachers expressed concerns about his attitude and behaviour, and that was communicated with AR's father, and I arranged for the members of staff to speak directly to him as well.
Thank you. And at that stage, so we're still in July, the very end of year 8, when you say several teachers mentioned concern, was that still in the sphere of being distracted, distracting others, perhaps not wholly unusual for teenage boys?
Yes, losing focus and a general poor attitude.
Can you remember, if you can't remember, you must say so, but how did the poor attitude side of it display itself?
The teachers who expressed the concerns raised concerns about poor attitude.
Was that to work, to others, behavioural, a mixture? Can you remember? If you can't, you should say so.
I can't remember, sorry.
Thank you. We then go to year 9, so the academic year 2019-2020, and you tell us in paragraph 20 of your statement that AR's behaviour began to markedly deteriorate at the start of that year. Mr. McGarry touched on this, but we start, I think, with the fact that on the 20th of September, AR hit a fellow classmate on the head in a lesson. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And in that September issue, which I think is that one that is recorded in the log, do you remember what the investigation showed about that incident, about what had been going on?
Could you repeat that, please? Sorry.
Yeah, can you remember what the investigation showed about that incident, what had been going on?
Just that there was friction between AR and one boy in particular, but not just one boy, some other boys as well.
Thank you. And again, would this be a fair summary that I've taken from the log, that the concern that was raised when asked about why AR had hit a fellow classmate, indications had been that the other boy had been poking AR in the forehead or slapping him on the head, but the other boy had said that that had followed a number of incidents in which AR had been calling that other boy fat.
Correct, yes.
On that day, but also on a previous occasion.
I believe so, yes.
In general terms, we see that from your statement and also from the records, that the other boy, please don't use their name, but the other boy concerned, I think, was willing to enter into mediation and discussion to try to diffuse things. Is that right?
That's correct. That was offered.
But AR was not prepared to engage in that.
Yes, he declined the offer.
And if we go back to paragraph 21 of your statement, which helpfully Sarah has on screen, you say you recall AR being frustrated as he was of the view that a student was bullying him. However, when we suggested mediation to resolve this, he refused to engage.
Correct, yes.
And at that stage, at that level, you say in this paragraph that there was little that the school could do without AR's cooperation and willingness to provide any further information. Is that right?
With regards to mediation, yes.
You go on to explain in paragraph 22 that on the 4th of October, so a fortnight or so, I think, later, AR's father contacted you by email to express concerns over a student who he said had threatened AR. You say the school investigated that, both students were spoken to. And the other student informed his head of house that AR said they were going to have a fight, but they were only messing. Just pausing there, please don't use the name, but was that the same boy, can you remember, as the September incident, or a different boy?
It's the same boy.
And as a result of that, those AR and the other boy were going to be in several lessons together. And is this right, that seating plans were rearranged, presumably to keep them well apart?
Correct, yes.
And teachers told to be remain vigilant about that?
Yes, and report any concerns.
In relation to matters at that stage, just help us with this. You'll have a good deal of experience of this from your safeguarding work. There are strongly expressed views in the statements from Alphonse in particular that there was bullying going on. And all of us have some insight in the fact that bullying can be insidious, it can be done deliberately out of sight and in ways that are difficult to detect. Are you able to help the inquiry to understand whether AR could in fact have been the subject of bullying by this other boy and it wasn't picked up on?
There could have been incidents that were undetected, but from the investigations that we conducted, we found no evidence of that. Had we have done so, then we would have acted accordingly.
Obviously, there were two later very significant events. There's the October incident leading to the permanent exclusion, and then the hockey stick attack later on. Did any credible information come forward from other pupils after those significant events saying, well, actually, I ought to report that another boy or boys had been bullying AR? Did anyone come forward and say he was the victim of bullying?
Not to my knowledge, no.
If there had been any systemic pattern of AR being bullied, given the very serious events that happened later, do you think it's likely that pupils and pupils or the school community generally would have got to know about it and would have informed?
I think the students would have got to know about it and they would have informed us.
Thank you. We turn then to the 7th of October, paragraph 23, and Mr. McGarry has told us something of that, involved in a fight with another student leading to a temporary fixed-term exclusion. And again, being careful about names, was that with the same boy or with a different boy?
I can't remember who that person was, sorry.
And I think that is an incident that was not, I think, recorded in the house log. Do you know how that came to be?
No, I've not worked at the school for over 3 years now. I've not had primary access to information, so I don't know why that was omitted.
Thank you. Before we then get on to the events of the following day, can I ask this in general? The information that had come to you and to others in relation to these events was that there may have been an element of AR, in fact, making comments to other boys, leading in some cases to retaliation. In the dealings that you had with AR's parents, particularly his father, was he receptive to the possibility that AR may have been a protagonist in tensions with other boys rather than a victim of bullying?
No, he believed that his son was the victim of bullying.
We know then that on the evening that followed, Lancashire Police contacted the school, and we've heard from PC McNamee about that. And I think the initial contact was because it was out of hours that the information had come in from. I think the initial information came in, is this right, by email?
That's correct.
And it's perhaps only fair of me to note that I think that the email, came in at 10 o'clock at night or after 10 o'clock at night.
Just after 10 p.m.
Yeah. And one should note that not only were you picking up safeguarding emails at that time of night, but I think, as Mr. McGarry has told us, you contacted the head that evening about that information, yes?
That's correct, sir.
And as a result of that, when AR then came to school, measures were in place to ensure that his bag was searched.
That's correct, at 8:30 the following morning, as soon as we could.
Thank you. Can I ask you to look next, please, at LCC 001551, page 2. LCC 00551 at page 2. Thank you. This is much later on. You see the date of it, the 4th of May 2021. Do you see that there? It's in the sent on the Tuesday, the 4th of May 2021. It's being highlighted for you.
I never received it.
No, don't worry about that. We'll take it in stages. I'm just introducing the document for you, all right?
Yes,
So
I received it
First of
this
all,
week.
you see the date, the 4th of May 2021.
Yes.
And you wouldn't have seen this at the time, but I'm just giving you an opportunity to comment on it. So this is representations that Alphonse R. was making about AR's later EHCP file. He asked for information that he's giving to be printed off and put on the file. And he's really asking for, from his point of view, the record to be put straight, or for his views on it to be made clear. So the fact that no one at the range, especially Mr. Cregeen, who is my regular contact, reported that I had asked the school to protect AR disappoints me. I recall 2 weeks before this forwarded email to Mr. Cregeen, because of AR's insistences, fear and worry, when I verbally reported my concerns to Mr. Cregeen as an officer I was familiar with, he stands at pedestrian crossings as a safeguarding officer, I approached him and told him that another boy, a practitioner of mixed martial arts, had slammed AR on the floor a few days earlier, and AR had to be rescued by others. Mr. Cregeen had assured me that he was going to speak to the boy. He seems to have done nothing in his email, see attached. Again, in my email to Mr. Cregeen is a reference to my verbal report to him of the attack on AR by this other boy 2 weeks earlier. Every now and then, stressed and fearful, AR was asking me to do something about it, that he had to stay behind at the end of the French lesson that he shared with the other boy. French was the last lesson before his home time. The French teacher had been aware of this boy and his 2 other friends. They were just friends, but they did not threaten AR as the other boy, I think it should be, has. AR had become lonely because the other boy was popular, and AR had to keep his distance from anywhere where the other boy was at break time. Consequently, AR was waiting for me with the French teacher, who by now was well aware of AR and the other boy, and stayed behind with AR. We'll just go a little bit further down. I regret that I did not understand the trauma AR was going through. He was used to the bullying that he was saying that threatening behaviour by the other boy had become normal. I'd encouraged him to speak to Mr. Gujian, but he would decline, saying, "You are the adult, do it for me." In hindsight, I wish I had taken the matter to the head teacher soon after AR told me, rather than trusting it to Mr. Gujian. AR lived in constant fear several months before leaving the range high, and I will live to regret how and why I failed to realise the magnitude of it. Mr. Gujian, I introduced that by saying that this was Alphonse R's perception that he was later putting forward, and it's only right that I give you an opportunity to comment on that.
Yes, those aren't my perceptions of the situation. This was, as I said, sent almost 2 years after he'd left the school. Only became aware of this just this week. And those are not my recollections of the time.
And do you recognise that sort of description at all as being a fair reflection of what was happening, both what may have been happening between AR and the other boy and the criticisms of your lack of responsiveness to it?
I don't have any recollection of him being thrown to the floor on that occasion, no. And that wasn't my impression of our relationship when AR was a student at the school.
All right. So we come back then to the events on the 8th of October. You've explained that on arrival, AR was met. Would you have been expecting the police themselves to attend school that morning in light of the information given the previous night?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I know they passed on the information to us, but not necessarily expecting them to attend.
You explain in paragraph 37 of your statement that the bag was searched and he had no knife on him that morning.
That's correct, yes.
But he did admit to you, I think, that he had brought a knife in previously. Is that right?
Yes, he confirmed that he had brought the knife in previously because he was, in his words, sick of being pushed around.
And if we could have paragraph 37, please, on screen. It's page 36, Sarah. Page 6, paragraph 37. So RAN 4036 at page 6, paragraph 37. Says he was being tired of being pushed around. He admitted that he would have used the knife to stab someone, but that he would not bring one in again. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And it may be an obvious question, but what was your reaction to that?
Complete shock.
Because?
Because he said he had been, or he was prepared to use it, and that was despite knowing the consequences of taking such action.
So in paragraph 38, you deal with that. You say you asked him if he understood the significance of his actions, to which he responded that he did. What did you make of that? Did you form the impression that at that time he really did understand the significance of his actions? He's then, I think, 13.
Well, he'd said that to me, so I assumed that he was telling me the truth, and he was aware of the consequences of taking such action.
Did it strike you just that morning that AR realised that the combination of the information that had come through the police and the admissions that he was making were almost inevitably going to lead to his, in what in old terms would have been being expelled, permanent exclusion?
Yes.
He understood that, you think?
No, sorry, I thought you meant, did I understand that? I'm not sure he did understand that at the time.
And what was his demeanour when he was making those comments?
He was very calm indeed. His expression was very matter of fact. He wasn't emotional, and he certainly didn't express any remorse at any time.
Understandably, as you set out in paragraph 39, given the seriousness of that, Mr. McGarry, the head, was immediately briefed, and it was determined by him, as he's told us about in evidence earlier today, that the most appropriate form of action was going to be permanent exclusion. You tell us in paragraph 39 that you agreed with that. Given the seriousness of the incident and the danger posed to the rest of the school, it was determined by Mr. Gary, and I agreed, that the most appropriate form of action to ensure the safety of the school was to permanently exclude him. Yes?
Correct, yes.
So the same day he's sent home with his father, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
The permanent exclusion taking effect from the 9th of October.
That is correct, yes.
Were you aware, Mr. McGarry has told us about his involvement with this, were you aware of the response of AR's parents to that decision?
Only through the minutes of the pupil disciplinary committee meeting that was on November the 5th.
Thank you. We know, can I just deal with one aspect? We know that you had a discussion with PC McNamee about these matters. We look at page, right, in fact, I don't think I need to turn it up, but do you remember having a discussion with PC McNamee and being advised by MASH that to share additional information about his recent behaviour, including the comment about that's why teachers get murdered? Do you remember sharing that further information?
Which paragraph is this? Sorry, sir.
Forgive me. Should we pick it up at paragraph 76? I wanted to come back to this later on, but
Yeah.
you raised a concern with MASH. And I was of the view that it met the MASH threshold for level 4 child protection. In the context of that, I think you provided additional information, including about the earlier comment in relation to its attention about that's why teachers got murdered. Do you remember sharing that additional information?
Yes, that was discussed with PC McNamee and then subsequently shared with Lancashire MASH.
Yeah. So if we look at it at LN Lanc 4066, forgive me, I was trying to do it without going to the documents, but let's go to the documents. So if you go to page 2, please. At the bottom of the page, do you see there, 8th of October? So that this is PC McNamee and the information following a discussion with you. So there's the searching of the bag. You're passing on the information about his comment about teachers getting murdered. Do you see that there? Yeah?
Yeah, so that was
That's all
included
information
in
that you're
conversation, yes.
giving. If we just go over the page, just to finish it off, at the top of the page, Sarah, please. AR had been indefinitely excluded from the school whilst the conversation is held about his future at the school, and Mr. Grigien is to update me via email once that's known. Now, a small matter, but I think at that stage you don't appear to have mentioned the earlier fight in the English class. Was there any reason for that? It's not perhaps the most important matter, but...
No, perhaps it was just focusing on the concern of him bringing a knife into school.
And Mr. Grigien, I apologise to some extent for going into details on this, but it's an aspect of earlier evidence that the inquiry heard about the police and to whom this matter was reported as a crime. So PC McNamee's recollection is that when he had this conversation with you, he advised you to report the fact that AR had brought a knife into the range to Merseyside police. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. I think I would have remembered that, and I would have made a note of that as well, and asked who to report that on to.
I don't need to bring this document up on screen, but if you would take it from me from the moment that there is a contemporaneous record in which PC McNamee, so the reference is Lanc 4070, dated the 24th of November, where he made a comment that he'd asked the school to notify Merseyside police of this. The reason for this would be that it would have been Merseyside police's area in which the crime of bringing the knife into school had actually occurred. Do you follow?
Yes.
But you don't recall a request to that effect?
No, I don't recall that request, no.
PC McNamee also told us in evidence that he has a note in his police notebook. Again, the details of the note don't matter, but it's dated the 8th of December 2019, and he thinks that he may have had a further call with you on that occasion. Do you have a recollection of a further conversation with PC McNamee?
Not on that date, no, sorry.
And in fairness, he wasn't sure about this, but he thinks he may have mentioned to you again on that occasion that it would be appropriate for you to report this as a crime to Merseyside police so that it was on their systems. But again, that doesn't mean anything to you now.
No, sir.
And again, in fairness to you, it's right that PC McNamee and I think as well also the constabulary have accepted that they themselves should have done that. But do you think that there's a chance that that may have been mentioned to you, but that it got overtaken by the later events of the December attack?
I don't know. I don't recall that being put to me for me to make that referral to Merseyside police.
Thank you. I'm just going to deal briefly, perhaps before we break, with a number of documents with which you were involved that followed the events of the 8th of October. So could we have on screen, first of all, RAN 505. And if we could go to page 2, we see MASH. And if we could have the second half of the page highlighted, please. Is this the prompt MASH referral that you made on the 8th of October 2019? Just take a moment to refresh.
Yes, to Sefton MASH.
Yeah, so Sefton MASH. And the main paragraph of text, school received an email on the 8th from PC McNamee saying that AR had been carrying a knife to school. Please see quote from PC McNamee, and then your emboldening in the original. There is therefore considerable risk of this seriously escalating. And by putting that in bold and a direct quote from what the police had said, were you there trying to alert the MASH to what you saw as this being a very serious matter?
Yes, I was.
And you explain that a search had been done and no knife had been found, but you gave the excuse that AR had given, being fed up with being pushed around. And alarmingly, AR said that he would have used it to stab someone if he had to. Yes?
Yes, correct.
And you'll understand that part of the reason, Mr. Graham, while I'm raising this with you, is to follow the audit trail through. And so the most concerning aspect of the conversation that you had been party to with AR, you passed on to the MASH.
I did, yes. Although, sir, can I interrupt? Sorry.
Of course.
That was Sefton MASH, and because AR did not reside in that jurisdiction, it was returned to me to explain that I needed to contact Lancashire.
I understand. You went on to say in a separate matter, which AR says is unrelated to this, after recently receiving a detention, AR was overheard saying that's how teachers got murdered, so you passed on that information too, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
And that you were concerned about his mental state.
Yes, most definitely.
We go to, actually, Sarah, if we could just leave it at the moment, we see at the bottom of the page, please select the applicable threshold level, and then it refers to the threshold guidance for 2013. And so is that you saying level 4 there?
That was me determining the level of, the threshold level as being level 4, yes.
And what does that mean, level 4?
So level 4 is child protection, where it's deemed that the child is at serious risk of significant harm, is at harm or at serious risk of.
Thank you. And is that the highest level?
That is the highest level, yes.
We could turn next to RAN 5 zeros and 6, please. This is a safeguarding report. Is this an internal Range High School document? Can you help us with what this document actually is?
Yeah, so when a safeguarding concern is raised, at the time, this was the safeguarding reporting form. So this was also completed and placed on AR's file as well as additional evidence.
Thank you. So we go to the second page. You set out the background on the first page. Second page, please, Sarah. I'm interested here in the professional opinion. AR is a potential risk to himself and others and needs support to help his mental state, which is of great concern. Yes?
That's correct, yes.
He's recently hit a pupil in an English lesson and also commented that's how teachers get murdered after receiving a detention. Comment on the fact that he'd been isolated and spoken to about hitting the pupil. And that Alphonse had been emailed on the 5th of October to express concerns and provide an update as to the situation with the other boy. You go on to explain that the information has been referred to VJA, MM, and Sefton Mash. Can you just help with those initials? Is that Miss Ashworth?
Yeah, VJA, Mrs. Ashworth, assistant head teacher responsible for behaviour, MM, Mike McGarry, head teacher, and Sefton Mash, obviously the local authority.
Thank you. And then page 4, please. Thank you. I think you're there dealing with the difficulties over the return of it and that because AR lived in Lancashire, a referral needs to be made there. And then if we go to the bottom of the page, you detail the fact that AR had been sent home. You had been advised to call Alphonse R to explain that AR would have to remain out of school while the matter, which is very serious, is being investigated. So that's referring to the safeguarding actions that have been taken in the short term, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think you detail the fact that in terms of slightly being passed from pillar to post perhaps, but it emerged when you rang Lancashire Social Care and spoke to somebody there. They took AR details before transferring you to somebody else, who then told you that the police had made a referral already and the matter had been stepped down to early support and there was no need for you to re-refer to make an additional referral. Thank you, Sarah. If we just go back to the previous page where we were, you're quite right to go over the page. Could we just go back? The step down to early support, did you have a view on that?
My view was that AR needed support regarding his mental state, and I determined that to be level 4 as opposed to early help and support, level 2. So I felt that the risk was higher.
Thank you. So it was always planned that for Mr. Grosjean that he would be a witness, I'm afraid, who would go part heard overnight. I took the liberty of explaining to Mr. Grosjean before he started that he shouldn't discuss his evidence that he's giving overnight just as a formality. But would that be a convenient moment?
It certainly would. I'm sorry we've sat late. I'm sorry you've got to come back, Mr. Croogan.
That's very good. No problem, sir. Thank you.
And it's 9:30 tomorrow, I think, isn't it?
9:30, sir. Thank you. Thank you for saying
Sit
that.
down.